Things are getting pretty wild, my friends. Very wild. Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, says that 10 other states have deployed National Guard to Texas to defend the border. And we're hearing reports that private citizens in various capacities are making their way to Texas. There are many people, prominent personalities, saying do not go to Texas, fearing another January 6th type incident. I don't know what's going to happen. I think this one should be left up to Greg Abbott and the National Guard and law enforcement. It should be done through all the legal channels they're going through. If National Guard are being deployed, I think it's probably a safe bet to say private citizens shouldn't go anywhere near this in reference to any kind of conflict. I can't, tell people what they should or shouldn't do. If you're a private citizen, you can go where you're allowed to go. But I definitely think it's important to say there's a lot of danger right now, and Greg Abbott is walking a fine line, and he's walking the right line. And the best way this is carried out is if Greg Abbott can handle this with the assistance of other states. But a lot of wild news breaking all of this down. There's also reporting that the Border Patrol Union said they stand with Texas. So I'm having trouble corroborating a lot of this. I want to be careful. It's just a reporter I'm seeing on X. We'll talk about that. Plus, Donald Trump has been ordered to pay $83 million to E. Jean Carroll for defaming her. So they say things are getting absolutely crazy. And of course, my friends, I don't really know how to say this. I'm just going to. Ben Shapiro is the #1 rapper in the world right now. All right. Let's be fair. It's not absolutely true and correct to say that, but on iTunes worldwide, Ben Shapiro and Tom McDonald have released a song, and that in which Ben Shapiro raps one of the verses, and they're in the top of the iTunes charts. Now, a lot of people point out sales aren't, it's not a lot of competition on iTunes. We've done something similar. However, the song just went up. And so this is massive to reach this level in one day. And if everybody buys the song on Amazon or iTunes, it is entirely likely that Ben Shapiro could be, as of next week, not next week, but so throughout this next week, they'll track the charts. And then the following Tuesday, we'll release the Billboard charts across the board. Ben Shapiro will probably be a Billboard charting hip hop artist and rapper, because already the amount of sales they have. So we'll talk about that. Before we get started, head over to castbrew.com. Buy the best cup of coffee you'll ever have. We got Appalachian Nights. That's everybody's favorite. Rise with Roberto Jr. You can join the Cast Brew Coffee Club. When you buy from Cast Brew, not only are you getting the best cup of coffee you'll ever have, and I really do think you better try Appalachian Nights, because we have sold out of our ground and K-Cups of Appalachian Nights. We're restocking as fast as we can. Whole beans still available, but apparently this stuff's so good, people are buying it like crazy. But you're also going to be supporting the show. We sponsor ourselves, and we're working on physical locations. We have got a coffee shop currently under construction and second floor private club where we're going to be doing live events potentially once a month. We're still working out the details, but this means those in the Martinsburg, West Virginia area or anywhere close enough that wants to drive down, we're going to have members only live shows, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Support Cast Brew at castbrew.com. But also, my friends, head over to factswithben.com. That's fact, like facts, with ben.com, and you can pick up Tom McDonald x Ben Shapiro facts, and you can help make Ben Shapiro the #1 rapper in the world. I want to stress, this is not a sponsored spot. We are not paid to say this. Look, I'm a big fan of Tom McDonald, and I'm a big fan of Ben Shapiro, though I have criticisms of Ben Shapiro's commentary. I think a lot of you do. I respect the work. As for Tom McDonald, I think he's amazing, and I definitely want to see Tom succeed in the music industry. And when I talk about the work we do in music and how we want to smash our way into the Billboard chart rankings, the same applies for our friends who make music as well, which includes the guys over at Based Records, 5 Times August. And right now, with Tom McDonald releasing a song with Ben Shapiro, we love shouting out Tom McDonald. But when I heard that Ben Shapiro was going to rap, no one asked me to do this. I said, for the love of God, can we make Ben Shapiro the #1 rapper in the country? And it's just not only there's a great message in the song with what the lyrics are themselves, but the troll. I'm sorry. If there's anything I could buy, like if there's anything I could wish for right now, aside from justice on the border, right? But as a cultural endeavor we can all do right now as just something fun, it's to go to factswithben.com and buy the song to support Tom McDonald and Ben Shapiro. And again, we're not sponsored to say this. No one asked us to do this. I asked them to do it. And I said, well, we will shout you out. Before we get started, I also want to give a shout out to Orrin McIntyre, who says on Twitter, the year is 2024. Texas leads a coalition of over 20 states who oppose the federal government. Taylor Swift is the biggest name in professional football, Ben Shapiro is the #1 rapper in the country. It's only January. Welcome to 2024, ladies and gentlemen. Smash that like button. Become a member over at timcast.com if you want to support our work. And share the show with your friends. Joining us tonight to talk about this and everything else is the great Larry Elder.
Tim, thank you so much for having me. Hey, if I can be the black face of white supremacy, then Ben Shapiro can be the #1 rapper in America. I have a brand new book. It's called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State. And I'm breaking some big news.
Hold it up.
I'm breaking some big news on your show. I called the CEO, tell him I was going to be on your show. Turns out he's a big fan of yours. He said, you tell Tim, any of his viewers want a free copy of your book, have them go to oldglorybank.com, open up an account, and when you get your debit card in the mail, you will get a free copy of Larry Elder's book, As Goes California, a $25 value.
Oh, right on. What's the book about?
It's about California, how messed up it is, why I ran for the recall election. And at the time, I was thinking about running for president. Later on, I did. And about why I was running and what I would do if I became president.
We got to talk about that, especially with what's going on in Texas, these other states speaking up. As goes California.
Yep.
All right. Excited to have you here, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We got Hannah Claire Brimlow hanging out.
Hey, I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for SCNR.com. It's a really cool team. You should follow them at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. Phil's here.
Hello, I am Phil Labonte, lead singer of the heavy metal band All That Remains, very failed musician, anti-communist, and counter-revolutionary.
And what's up, guys? I'm filling in for Serge. It's Kellen. I'm wearing my Texas hat with all the news going on and today's culture war. I thought it was appropriate. So let's get to it, Tim.
Here we go. The first story from AmericanMilitaryNews.com. Video. Texas prepared for standoff with Biden. 10 states send troops and law enforcement to the border. Governor Abbott told former Fox News host Tucker Carlson Friday that 10 states have already sent National Guard troops or other law enforcement members to the southern border to aid Texas in the face of growing pressure from President Joe Biden's administration to allow Border Patrol agents to remove razor wire barriers the state installed to deter illegal immigrants from pouring into the state. During Friday's interview with Carlson, Abbott said he would be surprised if any of the 25 Republican states that have pledged to support his state did not send additional assistance. Quote, there have been about 10 states so far that have sent National Guard or other law enforcement, Abbott said. They are now joined together with us, and this is a fight for the future of America. Now, I don't know what's currently going on. News is happening it's changing rapidly with what's happening on the border.
Right.
Today was the deadline. The Biden administration was supposed to do something. Apparently, I've seen some people spreading a rumor that there was some, they said, okay, today's the deadline, but then they said something like 6 p.m., and I have not heard anything just yet. Some people are saying there's very little information coming out because something is actually going on behind the scenes, but I don't know for sure. Part of me wants to believe, because of normalcy and optimism bias, this will all blow over. But considering Ben Shapiro is the #1 rapper in the world, I think it's more likely to just erupt in the most absurd way imaginable.
I think it's important to point out that at one time, Democrats spoke like Donald Trump did about illegal immigration and about the borders. People like Chuck Schumer. People like Harry Reid, after the first bombing of the World Trade Center, Harry Reid even talked about how the 14th Amendment is interpreted to confer citizenship to an illegal alien who has a baby on American soil. He thought that was wrong. They even use the term illegal alien. People like that said this kind of stuff. Amy Klobuchar said it. Dianne Feinstein said it. Now, all of a sudden, they've done a 180, and anybody who feels the way Donald Trump feels is a bigot.
No, it's crazy. I think our country forgets that at one point we were willing to talk openly about the ills of illegal immigration. Right. As a country, we became afraid of being called racist. And then we said, it's okay, we'll just leave the border open. And now everyone else pays the cost of it, both financially and psychologically. It really detracts from the American spirit if we have a class of people in this country who are not actually a part of it. And we say to the illegal immigrants, the things that you did to get here, the sacrifices you made were actually for nothing because you don't get the benefits of crossing illegally.
I think it's less that people are concerned about being called racist and more that the Democrats realized this is a big voting constituency and they wanted to change the electorate because they were losing elections. America was a 50-50 nation, but you bring in a bunch of people who are going to pull the lever for the Democratic Party, they assume, and all of a sudden you're guaranteed a governing coalition for Democrats in the future. That's why they're doing this.
Yeah, it's pull the lever or just change the census data.
But it gives them congressional seats and electoral votes.
Of course.
The argument that you hear them make to the average person that's, say, like low political information is that
You mean stupid people.
I'm trying to be nice. Is that our unfunded liabilities are going to destroy the economy, and we need to have people come in to work because we do not have replacement levels of having babies and stuff. And I think that there is some validity to the argument, which is why I think it's convincing. I think that gets to, I think that makes enough of an argument to convince people that are low information. What do you think is the best way to convince them? Because I talk to people that they'll see stuff on the internet,
even if that argument,
they don't believe
even
it.
if the argument had validity, that population getting older, unfunded pension liabilities, so-called entitlements, so we need to bring in new people in order to make them contribute so that these people can get their full benefits. It still has to be legal. We have to know who they are. What they're here for, what their intentions are. You just can't come across a border and go, okay, well, you're solving our unfunded pension liability problem. It's ridiculous.
And I gotta say, before I would ever accept that proposed solution, I would accept if you have 3 babies, you pay 0 federal taxes.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
My only point, or the only point in asking that question, and the thing that I'm concerned with is convincing people that the situation is untenable, convincing them that this is actually a problem. Because I do believe that most people don't pay attention. Most people don't really watch the news very closely. And then when they do, they tend to listen to what the talking heads say, and they assume that that's the truth. Michael Malice talks about, when you tell the average person that the news is lying to them, it's like you're being told that the meteorologist is lying to you and he knows, right?
Right.
Most people think the news is telling the truth. And my concern is convincing them that we actually do have a real problem. And so I want to know what people think the best way to actually to move the needle, because it's coming to a head where it's possible that we could meme ourselves into actual conflict. Like, everything is theater until someone actually does something. And anytime you get dudes with guns in close proximity with opposing interests, there's a chance for that. And I don't want to see that happen.
Well, Phil, let's talk about the original sin here. The original sin is Joe Biden.
100%.
He comes in and he literally says, essentially, the borders are open. During the debate against Donald Trump, he said there's going to be a surge to the border. He promptly reverses every single one of the Trump policies that gave us the most secure border in our history. And I know that it is. I'm staying in a hotel where you guys send me. There are a whole bunch of DEA guys there, Border Patrol guys there. And I had a conversation with one right before I got into the car to come over. Yeah, at the hotel I stay at, where you send me.
Yeah.
And they had a whole bunch of Border Patrol people staying there. And I talked to them, told them where I was going. They knew who you were. And I said, Donald Trump often says that when he was president, we had the most secure border in our history. Is that true? And there were 2 guys there. They said, absolutely, it was true. And they said it was like a switch was turned on when Joe Biden came in. He stopped the Stay in Mexico program. He resumed catch and release. The Mexicans took off the 25,000 people they had in their military and moved them elsewhere. The problem then exploded, he said, overnight. There was a illegal alien coming across the border, being interviewed by a woman named Martha Raddatz. She's a longtime reporter with ABC News. And she said to him, if Donald Trump had gotten reelected, would you be here? He said no. And she was shocked. And he said, why? And he said, Joe Biden has given us permiso. Change the rhetoric, change the policies, and that's why they're here. So that's the original sin. And so Joe Biden should have seen this coming. You think America's going to sit around and watch millions of people coming across the country and do nothing about it? Are you serious?
And the reason why they're
basically asked for it.
The reason they're coming to Eagle Pass is because of the controversy. Mm-hmm. Because you have, if they go to other places, I think Lukeville is in Arizona. They're places where there's a lot of controversy. You have leftist organizations they know are prepared to accept you and fight on your behalf to enter. Right. Whereas if they go to some random, open border, like I should say unprotected border area, private property or otherwise, they could get shot. Mm-hmm. You go to Eagle Pass, let the right and the left fight about it, and the Border Patrol agents bring you in, bring you to where you need to go, where someone gives you money. But I'll say, I don't have a particularly high opinion of Border Patrol agents right now. However, should that report be correct from I think it's from Colin Rugg that the Border Patrol Union announced support for Texas, then I'm on board. But CBP agents have to stop facilitating the human smuggling. I see a video of them raising the razor wire to assist human smugglers. Those guys have committed a crime.
They're just following orders. They're just following orders.
Oh, all the more reason they should be in prison.
They're just following orders. They don't want to do this. They want to keep their jobs. They're just following orders. And Phil, to your point,
they should be in prison.
To your point, it is becoming an issue. In Iowa, it's the number one issue. It's not even a border state. I've been traveling all throughout Iowa. They weren't talking about this when I was there. It's now become the number one issue over inflation, over the economy in Iowa. And the most ingenious thing that the Southern governors did was start sending these people to cities like Chicago, in New York, and Martha's Vineyard, because then it came to them, and all of a sudden now that they're taking this problem seriously, or more seriously than before.
I have a friend, a good friend of mine, that was talking. He's got a friend that actually works at Border Patrol, and he isn't even he's not even convinced that they're, like I said, he's not even convinced there's a problem. He's like, well, my friend says that if they're here illegally, that Texas can just put them over the border, and he says, so this is actually a show from from DeSantis and a show from Abbott, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that these people are coming and asking for asylum, and that's why.
That's right.
And that's the problem.
And they're being processed in.
Yeah.
And they let them in. They give you a court date 3-4 years down the road. They don't show up. In fact, I asked one of the guys today, we have 8 million illegal aliens in the country since Joe Biden. He said that number is probably accurate. I said, how many of them are going to be deported if and when Donald Trump comes back? He said, I don't see how we can possibly write them up and get them out. They're here for good.
I'm pretty sure we dealt with this when who was the head of ICE a few years back?
Tom Homan.
Homan, right. I'm pretty sure in his testimony he outright said it doesn't matter if they're seeking asylum. Crossing through asylum legally, you must go to a legal port of entry and make a declaration. That means the CBP agents, who there's a video of them opening a gate in the bollard fence and waving them in. And these aren't the only instances.
Again, they were just following orders, though, Tim.
Which is an excellent reason why I hold them 10 times more responsible than I would if they were actually, you're saying they're intentionally committing felonies because they were told to. Does not change the fact they committed felonies.
Well, that's a fair argument, but Joe Biden and Mayorkas are telling you with a straight face the borders are secured.
Biden said the border's not secure.
He said it recently.
Yeah,
but before before that, when Mayorkas said the borders are secured,
he doesn't know what's going on.
The press secretary confirmed that she thought the borders were secured.
I think I completely agree. Joe Biden should be impeached over this and convicted over this.
Talk about insurrection.
Subverting the law, a violation of Article. Greg Abbott says Article 4, Section 4, and Article 1, Section 10, and so now he's actively trying to stop the state from defending itself.
Right.
Yeah, I think for this, Biden should be impeached and convicted, and following his impeachment and conviction, criminally charged along with people in his administration. That being said, the challenge we face right now is the political barrier of we don't want the Democrats to be able to sub out Joe Biden at a time when Joe Biden is we want the people to vote to bring in Donald Trump to solve the problem. We actually impeach and convict Joe Biden. They could bring in Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom, and it's going to benefit them and the corruption.
Not going to happen, Tim. Here's the deal. The reason Joe Biden is not going anywhere, if you can fog up a mirror, it's because the next person in line it's not Gavin Newsom, it's not Michelle Obama, it's Kamala Harris. She wants to be president. I read a lot of black media, and they feel she's being picked on for her so-called cackle. They feel that Joe Biden has given her thankless tasks, like getting to the bottom of the root causes of illegal immigration. And black women are the most loyal part of the Democratic base, and they will be furious if she's drop-kicked for anybody other than a Michelle Obama. And Michelle Obama does not want the job. She wants to be loved. She wants to be liked. There's nothing that suggests to me that she has the temperament.
I want to send her thank you notes every Christmas for that.
She does not have the temperament to be a politician. She complained for 8 years about what it was like to be in a fishbowl of being first lady. What makes you think she wants to be a politician?
Nothing.
She likes to be wealthy and influential.
Here's the play. All Trump supporters must send warm thank you letters to Michelle Obama, but also include we would be upset with you and we wouldn't love you anymore if you ran for president. So just keep it where it is and we're good.
And if Kamala Harris is drop kicked for some white dude like Mayor Pete or Gavin Newsom, they will be livid. They won't vote Republican. They just won't vote at all, thereby guaranteeing whoever we nominate will win. They won't do that.
It's a rock and a hard place for Democrats, man.
So
you live with the identity race card, you die with it.
So Kamala Harris,
and that's why she's there. She got picked because she's a black female. She's still a black female. By the way, she wanted to run for president. She did run. Yeah. And tell her to step aside for Michelle Obama, even if Michelle Obama announced.
But
Kamala ran for DA of San Francisco. She got elected. She ran for AG of California, got elected and reelected. She ran for U.S. Senator, got elected, and she's on the card with Joe Biden, got elected. She's never lost an election when she's been on the ticket.
Nothing.
And there's nothing at all that suggests to me that she's going to, oh my God, I'm incompetent. I'll step aside for Michelle Obama. Oh my God, I'm incompetent. I'll step aside for Gavin Newsom. Not going to happen.
Unless she, along with Biden, are impeached and convicted. And she's ineligible.
But what would she I mean, what is the timeline in that? I think it's more likely they just leave Joe Biden where he is.
Zero chance
Right.
of either of them.
I don't think they would impeach. They may want to, honestly, because how can you the Kamala Harris thing is a huge problem for Democrats. How do
Massive problem.
They can't even. So how do you get Michelle Obama in without both the backroom and forward-facing deals? If they were, Roger Stone said they're going to offer her a Supreme Court seat, Kamala Harris, and she'll bow out. And I said, no, that might solve the backroom deal.
No, they already had a chance to do that with the Ketanji Brown Jackson seat.
But my point is,
come to her and ask her. She said
right. My
no.
point is, there may be a backroom deal with Kamala Harris, but how do you publicly explain Kamala Harris no longer being in the running for president?
Kamala Harris wants the job. She wants the job. She ran for the job.
And you don't think there's anything they could offer her as a substitute?
Like what? What's a sub to be president?
I don't know.
First black woman president. There is nothing.
There's nothing.
better.
That's the thing. I mean, there was this idea that theoretically they could offer her a Supreme Court chair, but I don't think she would take
They could offer her
else.
treasurer of Black Lives Matter. There's a lot of money there.
Larry,
in fact, I'm running for that.
I appreciate. I love the fact that you are here delivering this information because this is all the greatest news that I've heard all day long.
And regarding Gavin Newsom, I mean, think about Gavin Newsom. Aside from what I said about Kamala Harris, what is Gavin Newsom going to offer if you feel that we're on the wrong track?
Nothing.
He praised the pullout of Afghanistan. He's probably the only major politician who did. He's a more extremist on climate change than Joe Biden. He wants to outlaw the sale of new gas-powered cars, as I explained in my book, As Goes California, by the year 2035. He's more of a climate change extremist than Biden is. He loves all the spending. He set up a panel for crying out loud for reparations in California. He's more left-wing than Joe Biden. If you're unhappy with how the country's going, what makes you think Gavin Newsom has prescription to make things better?
So I know, like you're really, philosophy and stuff, and you know about Marcuse and stuff like that. Is Gavin Newsom, is he a true believer, or is he just someone that is doing what he's told by like people that know theory and people that know?
It's not that complicated. Gavin Newsom is just dumb. He's just dumb.
Okay.
I mean, raising taxes, people leaving California, and you want to raise even more taxes.
Okay.
He's just dumb.
So it has nothing to do with any philosophy, leftist
I don't
philosophy.
think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, you'd know better than I am.
He shut down the state in a more severe way than anybody else did, while leaving his own private winery open, his own kids in private school. It ticked people off, which is why he faced a recall election. He doesn't get it.
I was surprised that he survived that recall, to be honest with you.
And by the way, his numbers now are the worst they've ever been. And they're citing crime and homelessness as the two reasons why.
And they cheated you out of that.
Yeah.
Do you want to break down for us how that went down with, you were running, it looked like you were set up to win.
A couple of things happened, Tim. First of all, as I explained in my book, they tried to keep me off the ballot. The first provisional ballot comes out, Elder's name's not on it, even though we did all the things. You're supposed to get signatures and this, that, and the other, and do all the filing. And you have to turn in 5 years of your tax returns. By the way, I think illegally. There was a law that was passed by the California legislature. This is before Donald Trump's tax returns had been illegally exposed, because they wanted him to turn them over. Even the outgoing governor, Jerry Brown, didn't sign it because he thought it was a violation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So Gavin Newsom comes in, signs it, and requires anybody running for president or governor to turn over 5 years of tax returns. We didn't even feel it applied to a recall election, but we did it anyway. You have to do 5 sets, 500 pages and 500 pages. For reasons that still I don't understand, there were 7 pages missing from the second set of the 2. So the California Secretary of State says Elder is not eligible because he did not comply with the requirements.
Wow.
Even though there's a provision that says if there's a minor error, the Secretary of State has the power to correct that minor error. So we filed a lawsuit. And the judge who heard the lawsuit was a UC Berkeley graduate, not good. Female, not good. Democrat, not good. And up for a judgeship by Gavin Newsom, not good, not good, not good, not good.
Wow.
It's on YouTube, the hearing. It was about 15 minutes long. And she said to the California lawyers, gentlemen, first of all, the California Secretary of State has a power to correct a minor error. And all you had to do was look at the first set to find the 7 pages that were missing from the second set. You didn't even do that. And secondly, I don't even believe the law applies to a recall election. What do you have to say? And it was over. It was done.
Wow, really?
So that's the first thing they did. And then, of course,
So she cited for you.
right away. Wow. Right away. Slam dunk. Booyah. I told my lawyer that my cousin Vinny could win this case. And he said, all right, hire my cousin Vinny. I said, come back. Come back. I was joking. But the big thing is that in California, we have this endless voting, almost 6 weeks. And during the campaign, I made, my opinion, one tactical mistake I made was I never said anything at my rallies to go and vote right now. But I knew more people were going to show up and vote on the same day, which they did. Long lines, almost as long as the election of 2020. But they had been collecting ballots for almost 5 or 6 weeks. And there's ballot harvesting. I didn't tell people to do that.
Yeah.
And we need to get in that game. And in California, registered Republicans are outnumbered by non-registered Republicans 3-1. I got outspent 10-1. In comes, and for a while, it was a two-step deal. The first part is, do you want Gavin Newsom recalled? And if 50% plus one said yes, whoever got the most votes on the replacement side would win. There were 46 candidates, including myself, on the replacement side. I got 3.5 million votes, more than almost all the others combined. California has 58 counties. On the replacement side, I carried 57 to 58. The only one I lost was San Francisco, and I lost that by, wait for it, 149 votes. I raised $27 million in 7 weeks. Gavin Newsom outspent me 10-1. And for a while, the first part of the ballot, do you want Gavin Newsom recall, was in the margin of error. They were scared bleepless. Yeah. Big article in the Hollywood Reporter. Gavin Newsom called out all these entertainers to come in. Snoop Dogg tweeted against me. A whole bunch of other celebrities tweeted against me. In comes Joe Biden. He says, Larry Elder is the closest thing to a Donald Trump clone as I've ever seen. I don't know if I should have been...
You're the closest thing to a Donald Trump
I don't know if I
clone?
should have been flattered or offended. But Barack Obama cut a commercial for him. Kamala Harris did.
That's the kind of stuff that
Elizabeth
blows
Warren
my mind.
did. They all did. And I took one picture of Donald Trump in my life at that time. Both of us had our thumbs up together. I saw that picture over and over and over again. They kept showing it over and over again, and they said this. They didn't say, Gavin Newsom is doing a great job for the people of California on crime, on homelessness, on how bad our schools are, on water management, on fire management, and the fact that people are leaving. No, Gavin Newsom, stop Republican takeover. That's what they said over and over again. That was a line. Stop the Republican takeover. No matter how bad things are, Republicans will make things worse.
The Democrats haven't run on any of their achievements or anything in almost a decade now.
You know, and Phil, I opened my book with this story about what happened after I ran for governor. I go to a restaurant on the west side of L.A. L.A. is liberal. West side's even more liberal. I get there about 15 minutes before my buddy. And the table over here with two ladies, and I think they feel sorry for me sitting there by myself. So we start talking. Turns out they're 85 years old. They've known each other since the second grade. One of them was celebrating her 85th birthday. One of them said she's a human rights proponent, whatever that is. And then about 15, 20 minutes into the conversation, she says, wait a minute, I know who you are. You're that guy that ran the recall. You're that Larry Elder. She smiled. She said, guess who we voted for? I said, you didn't vote for me. I said, how do you know that? I said, let's see. We're on the west side of L.A. You're both Jewish. One of you was a human rights activist. You didn't vote for me. And they admitted they had not. I said, well, let me ask you something. How do you feel about the crime? And they both admitted they knew people who got mugged. How do you feel about the way Gavin Newsom shut down the state? They both said that they knew people who lost their businesses. A third of all restaurants gone forever in California. How do you feel about schools? They both admitted they would never put their kid in a public school in Los Angeles to save their lives. How do you feel about the fact that people are leaving? They both admitted they lost friends. I said, so here we are completing each other's sentences, but you didn't vote for me. Have you ever had a conversation with a conservative Republican before? They looked at each other and they said, we have not.
Yep.
I also talk in my book about, I've got some back issues. I know you're a skateboarder. I could never do that. I've got some back issues. And a friend of mine recommended this massage therapist who said she could do some interesting things with my back. So I go to this place. I think it's going to be an office building. I drive down a residential street. I knock on this house. Door opens up. Lady comes to the door. She's got tattoos everywhere, piercings everywhere but her eyeballs. Her hair is 4 or 5 different colors. I get hit in the face with a big plume of marijuana smoke. Not that I would know what that would smell like, guys. And she starts working.
You were probably right.
She starts working on my back, and she's playing Motown music, which is my favorite genre of music, not rap, Motown. And there's a song that comes on, My Girl, probably my favorite song of all time. And I told her, this is written by Smokey Robinson. He wrote it for a guy named David Ruffin, who's in the lead singer of The Temptations, who unfortunately had a drug overdose. And the song comes on, oh, this is Marvin Gaye from a song called What's Happening Now. Barry Gorder, the CEO of Motown, didn't want him to record it because Barry liked to control all the rights of recording. Wow. And they did it anyway and became the biggest hit Motown ever had. Every song that came on, I knew the backstory. And she said, about a half hour, I know who you are. When you called to make the appointment, I knew who you were. I didn't want to say anything because, didn't vote for you. Had I known you were this personable and this funny, I would have voted for you. And I said, do you know any Republicans? And she said, no. I said, not one? She said, no. I said, well, news bulletin. We have personalities. We have sensitive humor. She didn't know a single Republican.
Remember when Bob Dole was running and how stiff he was? And then after he got done, after the election, he went on, I think it was SNL, and everybody was like, if I saw that Bob Dole, or a bunch of people were like, if I saw that Bob Dole, I would have voted for him because he was personable. And the way that they wanted him to be on the campaign trail was really stiff and
informal.
That's what Obama had.
Right.
Yeah, he was great.
Celebrity.
But Tim, I am funny. I am personable. I am likable, and they know that. That is why they
very
attacked me
humble.
the way they did, and I'm also humble. That's why the LA Times called me the black face of white supremacy. And in fact, it was not even buried in the article. It was a headline. Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. Subheadline: You've been warned.
But you also don't get support from the RNC. I mean, this year when you were shut out of the debate,
not a dime.
they used a crazy, this poll doesn't count, you're affiliated with it, and so is Donald Trump. I mean,
Don't get me started on that. Okay, you got
no,
me started.
definitely
on that.
get
Yeah,
started.
go.
started.
Because Ronna McDaniel's the worst thing about the Republican Party right now.
I had
And
this-
it was shortly after you were here last time.
and there's a
where
lot
you were
of things that are
excited
bad
for
about
it.
the Republican
I
Party.
had to submit 3 polls where I said 1% or better. Done, done, and done. She calls me up when the deadline is over and says, you can't use one of those polls. I said, which one? Rasmussen poll. I said, why? Because it's affiliated with the Trump campaign. And it is true. The rules were any poll affiliated with any candidate cannot be used by any other candidate. And I said, I submitted a 4th one. And she said, well, you submitted it too late. Well, it's because I didn't realize I needed to submit 4. And by the way, Rasmussen promptly put out a tweet and said, Larry Elder can use us. We're not affiliated with the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
And they still didn't put me up. I threatened to file a complaint with the FEC for $100 million. Wow. My lawyer is the former chair of the FEC. And he said, by failing to apply the debate criteria fairly to you, what the RNC did essentially was to give an in-kind contribution to the 8 people who did make the debate stage. And based on the value of the 2 hours of the Fox News time, that's $100 million. I said, if you don't put me on, I went to Milwaukee, even though I was told I wasn't going to be on the stage. I went to Milwaukee, and I told Ronna McDaniel and the RNC, if you don't put me up there, make the announcement by 2 o'clock, I'm going to file this complaint. And 2 o'clock came and went. They didn't do it, so I filed the complaint. So right now they're facing a $100 million complaint that I filed with the FEC.
I hope you win. And
Me
then
too.
when all the 100 million or whatever you have left goes to you, you have some kind of weird pseudo alternate version of the RNC, which is substantially better than whatever it is they're doing now.
Please.
Either that or I'll go.
Do you think that there's a way
Either
the
that or I'll do a
RNC
lot of
could-
drugs and do.
You'll find
Go to Vegas.
find what
No,
marijuana
you'll
smells
buy,
like.
You'll buy all of the original pressing Motown albums.
That's
and
right.
Vinyl.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a way the RNC could right the ship? I mean, is it a change in leadership that would change these things?
I think had Harmeet Dillon won that election, everything would have been different. By the way, they didn't help me either during the recall.
Yeah, that's what I remembered first, and then the presidential.
The Kevin McCarthy at the time told all the dozen or so House representatives to endorse a guy named Kevin Faulconer, 2-term mayor of San Diego. And only 2 publicly endorsed me. They were Michelle Lee and Doug LaMalfa from the Sacramento area. By the way, I carried San Diego County by 30 points.
Wow.
And it was obvious that the grassroots wanted me. I mean, when I announced, I had no idea what was going to happen. I immediately shot to the top of the polls. And every time they had a debate, and I didn't go to any of the debates because I was raising money, and also we all knew what the issues were. I figured all that would happen is we chew each other up, and Gavin Newsom would have a lot of sound that he would use against us, which is why, by the way, I believe that Nikki Haley should drop out of the race. She's making Donald Trump spend money. She's given Joe Biden a lot of sound bites he can use against him.
She made a comment today, just before we started, talking about the finding against Trump, which I understand you want to attack your opponent, but it's a totally BS finding. Like, it's absolutely outside of the realm
Phil,
of reality.
what good does it do? I mean,
And to use that as it legitimizes it.
From a
Don-
person
Don-
who took a pledge to support whichever Republican could beat Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's not the one who let in 8 million people. Donald Trump's not the one that made us go from energy independent to having gas prices almost twice what they were. Donald Trump's not the one that made inflation get to 40-year high. He's not the problem. He's not the problem. And it's also, to me, damaging her 4 years down the road. Because assuming that Donald Trump is a nominee and assuming for a moment that he loses, and we do the postmortem on your show, Tim, one of the reasons you're going to offer is that Nikki Haley stayed in too long, cost Donald Trump money that could have been used against Joe Biden, and gave Donald Trump a lot of tape that he used against him in ads.
Let me jump to the story as we're talking about this race. We have this from SCNR.com. Trump ordered to pay $83.3 million in damages to E. Jean Carroll. Our legal system is out of control and being used as a political weapon, the former president said in response. Now, Trump has repeatedly said he never met this woman. Many on social media have pointed out that her story about Trump is the plot to an episode of Law & Order SVU. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you did not hear that one?
Yeah, no, it was. It was similar to a plot that was in a Law and Order.
That's right.
I'm not saying she got it from there, but awfully
People are pointing out,
awfully coinky-dinky, isn't it?
And then we have this from Nikki Haley, who tweets,
Yeah.
Donald Trump wants to be the presumptive Republican nominee, and we're talking about $83 million in damages. We're not talking about fixing the border. We're not talking about tackling inflation. America can do better than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Let me tell you, what Nikki Haley is doing here. First, Donald Trump issued a statement saying he does not want to be the presumptive nominee.
That's right.
He wants to win legitimately, and these primaries are actually good for him. So she's lying there. And then she is taking an attack from Democrats to use against the most popular Republican right now. This is disqualifying. She's a Democrat. She's got Democrat donors, Democrat voters, and she's using Democrat tactics to try and go after Donald Trump.
And using Larry Elder's tagline. For decades, I've been saying we got a country to save. And I said it over and over again during the campaign. Now, all of a sudden, Nikki Haley's been saying it. We've got a country to save. She's been ending her speeches with, we've got a country to save. Stole it from the great Eldersky. I get no royalties. I get nothing.
The great Eldersky. I love it.
And if Donald Trump has to pay her $83 million, why? I should have sued the LA Times for defamation when I was called the blackface of white supremacy. What could I have gotten?
Well, this is what's laughable.
Nothing, because we live in the logic of Herbert Marcuse.
Right. This is laughable. I actually tweeted something at Frank Luntz because he was talking about it. And I'm just like, anybody who works in media and journalism knows this is fake. And any journalist claiming otherwise is lying to you. Why? Every journalist knows Times v. Sullivan, because every day you write about someone, it has to, you work for LA Times. Oh, wait, sorry. You don't work for LA Times anymore. You work for the New York Times. When you're writing a story, it's got to get checked by legal. Legal has to, the lawyer goes through and makes sure you're not in violation. They all are aware of defamation and libel laws. And so here, Donald Trump is being told to pay $83 million. He's not allowed to say he didn't do it. It's remarkable. But Trump said several times in court when this was going down, this is not America. And the scary thing is, we are now in the world where there is no law. There's none. Yep. There is only left and right jury pools.
And
good luck.
And double standard. You've got Navarro facing 4 months for defying a subpoena. Meanwhile, Eric Holder was the first AG to be found in criminal contempt of Congress for failing to comply with a subpoena when he was required to turn over documents regarding Fast and Furious. Nothing happened to him.
No, yep. I mean, there's a complete double standard. Even though, I mean, even in this case, if you read the excerpt from E. Jean Carroll's book where she accuses Donald Trump, she says it was in maybe the summer or maybe the fall, but maybe the spring. She can't remember any of the details. She says the dress is still hung in her closet. Like, all of her allegations are ridiculous on their face. And he's never been tried in a criminal court, right? He has just been put through civil trial.
He's never been allowed to defend himself.
He's never been allowed, and in fact, he wasn't allowed to defend himself when he was president, just speaking openly. But she was allowed to make allegations with no basis.
There's a boatload of tweets that the Trump defense team wanted to submit that were incredibly graphic and called into question whether or not E. Jean Carroll is the kind of person that would be considered promiscuous or, just really reliable. And they just said, no, you can't put them into.
It's a complete double standard. She was allowed to be treated in a way that Donald Trump was not allowed to be treated.
The problem, and Larry knows this just as well as anyone else, and it's something that I harp on. We live in the logic of Herbert Marcuse. We live in a society where one political opinion is acceptable to attack. It is acceptable to use the government against one group of people that have a certain political opinion. It is acceptable to be violent against them. It's acceptable to hit them. It's acceptable to take their property.
I disagree.
You don't think that's the case?
That may have been 10 years ago, but since the culture war expanded to the point where we're at now with like Bud Light, I think it's now clear that institutions have no problem espousing the ideology of their side. The issue with this is that Donald Trump was sued in New York City, where it is a stronghold of communists.
Jurisdiction does matter, yes. Fair enough.
Donald Trump should sue in West Virginia, where 86% of West Virginians are huge Trump fans. And the jury pool would be like, we are impartial, and Trump should sue her for defamation in West Virginia. The question is, why does he not? If Trump went to West Virginia and said, I got a house here, I'm suing her here, he'd win in 2 seconds. He'd win $83.3 million. In fact, he'd win simply because I guarantee you poll 100 West Virginians about this, and they're going to be pissed off. Not everybody's going to know about it. Don't get me wrong. But if they know, they're going to be like, they're doing what to Donald Trump? In fact, you go to Western Maryland. Okay, Maryland, which is, Baltimore has basically got its boot on it. And we went to a diner, and they had flags of Donald Trump riding a tank, standing on a tank with fireworks exploding and him holding like an Uzi. There's one of him on a velociraptor. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, these people love Donald Trump. Yeah. Donald, sue her back and do it here. And sue her for defaming you, for claiming falsely. How amazing would it be?
You could even do it in the middle of California. I talk about this in my book. I travel up and down the state. There are large portions of that state where they love Donald Trump. I'm driving, I see big Trump signs. The farmers love him. People in the middle of the state adore him. It's people in the Bay Area, in San Diego, and in LA. They're the problem.
This is what we need right now. We need Donald Trump to sue E. Jean Carroll in West Virginia so that we get a default verdict, same as however it is his cases are going down, where they say it was false and defamatory that she claimed Trump assaulted her, and that she has to pay him because of it. So then New York says, no, Trump did. And then West Virginia says, no, she lied. And then there you go. The issue right now, what you're bringing up, Phil, is that it's true in the sense that it's true that Democrats and their institutions have no problem breaking the rules and doing these things. The only issue is I don't see Trump filing a lawsuit in West. Like, Trump could just choose to do it. He's not. Yeah, he's not doing it.
I have no qualm with what you're saying, and I agree. The solution to this stuff is lawfare. It is to bring as many lawsuits against any politician, any organization that's left leaning, anything that you can come up with.
But do you think that meant he would have had to sue E. Jean Carroll in 2019 when she first released this book?
I have no idea.
Because, theoretically, that would have been the first way to set precedent.
Who cares? Sue her for something else.
He would have been the president and they would have freaked out.
But it doesn't matter, because what we're clearly seeing here is lawfare. The trial against Trump for fraud in New York is clearly false. These claims are ridiculous on their face. So if they're going to look, they created a new law where women could bring up old cases and sue over it or something like this so that they could, which case was that? Was it E. Jean Carroll where she could claim that, because I think this is defamation. This was not related to sexual assault or I'm not sure.
You're talking about her lobbying to change the laws in New York?
There was a law that said we're going to introduce a 1-year window where people can sue over sexual assault.
I think it was to go after Harvey Weinstein.
Right. Okay. That was for Weinstein.
I think so.
If they're going to play this game, and all that really matters is a judge is going to determine for some reason or another Trump is not allowed to defend himself. So let's look at the fraud case. The judge ruled in default. He said, nope, Trump committed fraud. End of story. Have a nice day. You can't defend yourself. Mm-hmm. They just bang the gavel. It's done. Okay, well, Trump go to West Virginia and find someone who will do the exact same thing in the other direction. There we go. It's the only way it's going to change. Or the only moves we can make.
And there are a bunch of Republican AGs who also could figure out all sorts of ways to sue Democrats for this, that, and the other.
That's another thing that's maddening is there's plenty of Republican AGs. They should be inundating Democrat politicians for anything. It should be no holds barred lawfare. Just as much litigation as possible. This is the way they want it. Give it to them.
There's so many double standards. One of them is this election denier stuff. Hillary, for 4 years, referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate, said the election was stolen.
Did you see just the other day when Biden said that the governor of Virginia?
No, governor of Virginia was a real governor. Yeah. And you had the race in Georgia. Stacey, what's her last name?
Abrams.
Yep.
Stacey Abrams claims that she lost because of voter fraud. Hillary, for 4 years, referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate. 4 years. And the AG, a DHS secretary under Obama, Jay Johnson, testified under oath. Not a single vote tally was changed by the Russians. They tried, but they failed to change a single vote tally. 66% of Democrats, according to a YouGov poll, believe the Russians changed vote tallies to get Donald Trump elected. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Carter said it.
Yeah.
Imagine the president saying that election was stolen.
It is indescribable to try and explain to people like what it's like trying to make people understand that the idea that like the conservatives are living in a fantasy world, and you hear the rhetoric coming out of like MSNBC and CBS and all the standard narrative producing organizations,
the smear merchants.
And whenever I've said this, people push back and go, "Well, Hillary didn't file a lawsuit." Yes, she did. She joined the lawsuit that Jill Stein filed against Wisconsin and filed a separate motion to have the recount done by hand. Mm-hmm. Well, Hillary didn't storm the Capitol people on January 6th because she wasn't president. But Donald Trump got elected in November. There were 40 cities where there were protests, including violent protests. Police cars set on fire.
Mm-hmm. In D.C., hundreds were arrested. And get this, not only were there hundreds of people setting fires, smashing things.
That was at the inauguration.
Mm-hmm. At the inauguration.
Yeah.
The city actually paid the rioters.
Yeah.
The city paid the rioters out.
Yeah, there were 200 or 300 of them, as I recall. But I'm talking about when Donald Trump got elected. There were 40 cities where there were violent protests all over, including setting fire to police stations. My point is, had Hillary been president and the shoe were on the other foot, and the election was this questionable. You're telling me that her supporters would have said, "Oh well, let's rub some dirt on it. We'll get
So
back."
you're saying
It's not
Barack
true.
Obama engaged in insurrection? Barack Obama waged insurrection.
In what way?
Well, he was president when all of his supporters went out and started burning things
Yeah.
down. So that
Oh, yeah.
clearly means Barack Obama.
Yeah, from his rhetoric.
Because I don't recall Donald Trump saying to be violent or stormed anything. In fact, I recall Trump saying
the
go
opposite.
home.
Yeah, yeah. And he
Kamala
said, "I want
Harris-
you to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." which they always
Kamala
leave
Harris
out.
said that the people that were out in the streets should be. That verbatim, and they should be. They're not going to. She was saying they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. They're out there, and they should be.
But why do you think people forget these things? Like all of
You're
these
talking about
details get
the BLM riots.
Yeah.
of
They,
May.
I don't think they forget. I think the issue is Democrats don't know and don't care. I'm going to use Marianne Williamson as a good example. I heard she just dropped out recently too. I don't know if that's
Did she?
true. I think she may have. You want to check? But Marianne Williamson is a lovely woman. She's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
She's very smart. But she's unfortunately living in Wawa world where
She wants the Department of Peace, doesn't she?
well,
Yeah.
when we had her here, and we said, "Here is a bad thing that is happening," she goes, "Oh my, that is so bad." I say, "Here's another bad thing we're concerned about." She goes, "Wow, I didn't know that was happening."
Wow.
When you show her, hey, here's news. Like, for example, there's a book called Not My Idea that's just being given to children in public schools where it depicts white people, a white person as a devil offering you a whiteness contract. She nearly cried when she saw it. The issue with Marianne Williamson and many default liberals is they are being manipulated by demonic, I mean that figuratively, some might mean it literally, propagandists, and they're not aware of what's going on. Now, you said, why do people forget or not remember? All of us remember all of it.
She's still in.
She's still in? Oh, okay. I apologize. All of us remember all of this stuff, and we talk about it all the time. And we'll be on the show and someone will say, remember when this happened? Remember when that happened? It's that people like Marianne and her followers are never exposed to it in the first place.
Regarding the George Floyd / BLM riots starting in May of 2020, 4 months long. They're in the streets because of an assumption that what happened to George Floyd had to do with his race. The lead prosecutor was a black man. Opening statement, I'm a lawyer. The most important part of a trial is the opening statement. In his opening statement, he took pains to say police in general are not on trial. The Minneapolis PD in general is not on trial. This individual is on trial. In fact, he said the police are doing a good job. They have to make split decisions, life and death, in a very short period of time. This individual is on trial for what he did or what he didn't do. And he was never even charged with a hate crime. Yet most people are out in the streets because of the assumption that what happened to George Floyd had to do with his race. There's a website called policemag.com, my last point. And people who are self-described as very liberal were asked, how many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019? 50% of the self-described very liberal people thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019. 8% thought they killed 10,000.
Wow.
What did the regular self-described liberal people think? 39% of them thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019. 5% thought they killed 10,000. The answer, according to the Washington Post database, was 12.
Yeah.
That's the gap between what they think is going on and the reality. No wonder you're out in the street. I'd be out in the street if I thought the police killed 10,000 black men, unarmed black men every day.
I think Ben Shapiro
every
said the
year.
same thing. He was like, man, I think Ben was like, I would be protesting
Yeah.
with you if I thought the police were
They're
doing
clueless.
this.
And again, the point is that the lead prosecutor, a black man, never even implied that what Derek Chauvin did had anything to do with George Floyd's race.
There's a man on the street video where someone uses that data and asks, young black students at a college, how many, black men are shot every year. And they're shocked when they find the number is 12. But there's one guy in particular who argues with him. He's like, really? Only 12? Well, why don't we say like 100? He's like, no, we can't say 100. The number is 12.
We'll round it up to 100.
And it's like this thing where the guy just cannot accept it, so he asks to compromise on the number. But the number is...
And by the way, unarmed does not mean not dangerous.
Yeah.
Michael Brown was unarmed, but he had just done a strong arm robbery. His DNA was found on the officer's gun. So it does not mean you're perceived as dangerous. Remember a few years ago, that guy named Amadou Diallo, immigrant, was cornered because he fit the description. Police said, show your hands, show your hands. He goes and reaches into his wallet, and they thought he was reaching for a gun. They blew him away. Hillary called these 4 officers murderers. A multi-ethnic jury found all 4 officers not guilty because the gesture was reasonably perceived as threatening. So just because you're not unarmed doesn't mean you're not dangerous. So even the number 12 is probably even smaller than that. When you
We
get
have
down to the number of people
we have had conservatives come on this show, and I have talked about the Ahmaud Arbery case, and they did not know the details of this case. They still thought it was a guy jogging.
Right.
You had when the McMichaels were convicted, and I forgot the other guy's name. I should probably learn his name, to be honest. The guy who simply filmed it also went to prison. You had high-profile, prominent conservatives say something to the effect of, this proves conservatives aren't racist, as if to imply this time, with Ahmaud Arbery, it actually was a racist attack. When in reality, the issue at hand found in the court was not whether or not there was a hate crime committed. It was whether or not, while we all agree Ahmaud Arbery was in the act of committing a felony, the question is, did the McMichaels have a right to stop him? Mm-hmm. And the jury found the McMichaels did not have a right to stop the man who we believe was committing a felony because they did not witness the felony themselves. So any subsequent action was their responsibility. Ahmaud Arbery confronting them, trying to grab the shotgun from, I believe it's Travis McMichael. The shotgun goes off a couple times in the fight. Ahmaud Arbery takes it to the chest and dies. They are criminally responsible because they should not have. And fair point, they were told not to. Mm-hmm. However, I've had conservatives come on the show and say, oh, it wasn't those white guys chased down a black guy who was jogging? And I'm like, my friend,
but
did you read the story?
But the jogging story got told over and over. It was the headline. He might have been jogging, like all the time. It's William Bryan is the man who videotaped.
William Bryan. Despite the fact that police had evidence of him burglarizing a home, that the police had gone door to door and say, this is the guy we believe is burglarizing the home, right, and that a gun had been stolen. So when someone said, hey, it's that guy again, the McMichaels got in their car and chased after him, called the police. The police said, do not follow. They should not have followed. But many people argue the morality of, if your neighborhood is being, effectively terrorized by this repeat burglar, and even someone who even stole a gun, you're going to want to stop that. And there's a moral issue there. So the question ultimately became, and the jury decided wrong. The law states that if a misdemeanor is committed and you witness it, you have a right to citizen's arrest. However, if a felony is committed and you do not need to be a witness, simply someone could say that person committed a felony, stop them. However, because of the way the law was written in a very archaic fashion, the judge said to the jury, you decide whether or not they needed to be witnesses or not. And the jury said they should have been witnesses. Therefore, they're criminally responsible for the death.
Tim, but the big thing is this became a national story, a national narrative. LeBron James tweets that black people are afraid to leave their homes, when in fact it is rare for a white person to kill a black person anytime. It is rare. There are about 20,000 homicides every year. Most homicide is same-race homicide. Most blacks who are murdered by other blacks. Most whites who are murdered by other whites. However, every year there are roughly 750 interracial black-white homicides. 500 white people killed by blacks, even though blacks are just 13% of the population. 250 whites killed by blacks, even though 250 blacks killed by whites, even though whites are 60% of the population. It is very, very rare for it to happen. That's homicide. Let's talk about violent crime between blacks and whites, roughly 600,000 such instances every year. By that, I'm talking about attempted murder, manslaughter, rape, assault with a weapon, aggravated assault. 600,000 every single year. 85 to 90% is a black perp white victim, only 10% the other way around. So if anybody has a grievance, it ought to be white people. Because the numbers overwhelmingly show that they are more likely to be victims of crime by black people than the other.
But
here's the real grievance. It is white people who hate white people. So why
or feel guilty or who knows?
We would describe it as out-group preference. This was the survey that went viral several years ago. White liberals are the only demographic with a racial out-group preference. So so black people have a slight bias towards black people, Latinos towards Latinos, Asians towards Asians, white conservatives towards white people, liberals against white people. So I don't think the issue actually is that they have a grievance about white on black crime. I think that white liberals generally just don't like white people. And so if anything interrupts their narrative about white people, that's when they go on the offensive. So for example, Asians don't fit the narrative of white privilege. So Asians don't get included in their benefits package of how we got to help minorities.
Right.
So it's really just white people are bad. Have a nice day.
Well, I phrased it somewhat differently. I said, whoever said compound interest is the greatest force in the universe, and by the way, I checked, it wasn't Einstein who said it. Whoever said compound interest is the greatest force in the universe never encountered white guilt. I just think there's a whole bunch of white people that feel really, really bad about slavery, really, really bad about Jim Crow, really, really bad about how black people used to be treated, and this is their way of making up.
I hear you, and I can understand that, but I kind of think they're just white supremacists, and I mean that in the literal sense. We saw that Yale study we love to cite, where white liberals speak down to black people, and white conservatives don't. White conservatives meet a black guy, they talk to him like normal. White liberals, they dumb themselves down.
What up?
But not even that. They use second grade vocabulary. Like these people, in my mind, I don't think they have white guilt. I think they have a white superiority complex where they imagine them going like, well, we're so much better than they are. They need our help. But I'll give you a quick example.
It's white man's burden.
Right. So I met these activists when I was in North Dakota at the No Dakota Access Pipeline protest. And I'm there to document stuff. But of course, it's all leftist protesters who are very, woke. And I'm sitting down for dinner because I friends of friends. And we get into a conversation. This one guy brings up, so what happens is I said, I got to leave tomorrow because I have to drive to California. I have a meeting at 9 a.m. in 3 days. So I got to drive overnight. And he said, and he smirks and says, a meeting at 9 a.m.? He's like, that's colonial thinking. And I asked him, what is colonial thinking? When I have a meeting? And he's like, it's colonial thinking, dude. Like having a schedule to wake up. You think the Native Americans do that? They wake up when they need to wake up. They wake up when the sun comes up. And I was like, white people didn't invent time or scheduling, dude. And he was like, yeah, they did. It was the colonists who brought all that stuff. And I was like, bro, people in Asia have time and can track the hours of the day and decide we should meet at a certain point of the day. And he goes, no, it was white people who brought that. And I was like, my dude, the Chinese invented compasses 1,000 years before you did. And he goes, no, it's white Europeans who brought all that stuff to China. And I'm like, holy crap, this guy literally thinks white Europeans invented everything, developed science and technology, and then exported that to Asia. And I'm like, it's just true. China invented compasses 1,000 years before Europeans did. I don't hold that against I don't say, wow, Asia, you're so great, or Europe, you're so dumb. It's just a thing that happened. But these people believe white people invented everything. They're just white supremacists.
They invented it to oppress other people. That's the other part. To benefit themselves and to make it harder for everyone else to exist.
They made the compass to control direction. So that, yeah.
Yes.
They invented racism.
They invented gravity to keep us all down. I mean, like, white people are out of control.
Okay, well, that's a joke. But like when it comes to like racism, they have part of the theory is white people created racism in order to oppress other races.
Have you seen that video that Ami Horowitz did regarding voter ID?
Oh, it's a classic.
Oh my!
They ask all these college students, why is it that black people can't get voter ID? Well, they don't have access to the internet. So he goes to Harlem.
He says, he asks them, do you think a black person would not be able to get an ID or whatever? And they all say,
yeah, they said no.
They couldn't.
Yeah, they couldn't. They don't have access to computers.
Unreal.
So they can't find the DMV.
So they go to Harlem. Do you have a ID? Yeah, I got ID. You know what the DMV is? Of course I do. You know anybody who has? I don't know anybody who doesn't have ID.
My favorite. I have to bring up my favorite. My favorite is one of the excuses the Berkeley kids give is they have trouble finding the DMV.
Right.
And so he meets this like older black guy and he's like, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah. And he's like, do you know where the DMV is? And he goes, oh yeah, just go up here on 25th. right. He's giving him directions like as a normal question.
That's the thing. It's like,
and one woman was told that a lot of people don't think you can get ID.
Yeah.
And she said, who thinks that? And he said, do you think it's racist? She said, yeah, kind of.
There's this thing that goes on in like the critical social justice movement and stuff is they want to think about their blackness first. And it's like they forget that they're people. It's like these are normal people things to do. Finding out where in the city a building is not some massive challenge. The idea that a whole entire race can't find an address.
Well, look.
It's so offensive.
I think about what these Berkeley kids must think of the average intellect of a black person who can't figure out what a building is a few blocks away. I mean, it's a white supremacist idea. And people could not find a building.
I'm on the campaign. I announced before Tim Scott did. Tim Scott announces. I get a phone call from a reporter. You and Tim Scott are both black Republicans. What distinguishes you from Tim Scott? I said in 2016 when Donald Trump announced it, you say, you are both white Republicans. What distinguishes you from Jeb Bush? And she was quiet for 15 seconds. She said, point made.
But she's not sorry she asked.
Right,
she said point made, but she's going to ask it again.
Well, she withdrew the question, so I didn't.
I mean,
what distinguishes you from Tim Scott?
I would have trolled her relentlessly. Like, I would have just started.
I said I'm better looking.
No, I mean, I would have just started. I would just say a bunch of self-deprecating racist things. Like, is that what you wanted to hear?
It's ridiculous.
No, it's crazy. But I do think that they ultimately race as at the forefront of a progressive mind always. And they are
Always.
always, because they are all, I think, whether it's they hate themselves because they're
by design.
guilt, it's whatever it is, they ultimately use that to say, well, everything I've heard that is a stereotype about another race that could potentially be perceived negatively, I have to make sure I'm on guard against it at all times. Which is way worse.
What you're describing is the result of people being taught critical race theory. Critical race theory in and of itself is not ideas. Critical race theory is a way to approach the world. It is seeing race before anything else. So when we were arguing, oh, we don't want to teach kids critical race theory, we weren't arguing, oh, you don't want kids to know history or know that there are different types of people, different colored people in America or whatever. It is, we don't want people to have the illiberal view that race comes before the human being.
I gotta read this super chat from Jason Hutchison because he makes a really good point. Black people work at the DMV.
But they get lost all the time.
Dude, these Berkeley college kids are like that racist.
If you're black and you get hired at the DMV, you have to ask for
Phil,
directions every day.
I make this point in my book. I was in Boston in 2004 when this guy with funny ears, skinny guy, whose name nobody could pronounce, came out and gave the intro speech for John Kerry. And Barack Obama said, there's no blue America, there's no red America, people went nuts. There's no black America, there's no white America, people went nuts. He decided to run for president. He's on 60 Minutes. He was not yet the front runner, but he's catching Hillary. And the correspondent said, Senator, if you don't win, will it be because of race? And I sat back and I said, let's see what this guy says. He's going to give some sort of victocrat answer the way Al Sharpton did when he ran and lost and claimed it was racism, or Jesse Jackson ran twice and lost and said it was racism. Senator Obama said, no. If I don't win, it will be because I have not articulated a view that the American people can embrace. He also gave a speech at a black church when he was running. He talked about how much racism he thought was still in America. And he said, the Moses generation, referring to the generation of Martin Luther King, the Moses generation has gotten us 90% of the way there. Wow. My generation, the Joshua generation, has to get us that additional 10%, which I thought, Phil, was reasonable because there was a Fox opinion poll, 2002, 8% of Americans believe Elvis is still alive. 6% believe if you send him a letter, he'll get it. So it's 8% you got to wipe out. So basically what he was saying, we have 2% to work on. He gets elected. Both polls show that blacks and whites thought race relations would improve. When he left, both blacks and whites thought they got worse. Why? Yeah. For 8 years, this dude played the race card time and time and time again. From the Cambridge Police acted stupidly, Trayvon Martin, he invoked Black Lives Matter. He talked about Ferguson at a UN speech. He gave an interview to a podcaster and said, racism is in America's DNA.
So,
this is what communists do.
And then he brought in Al Sharpton over 70 times. What happened to the guy that I saw in Boston?
Yeah. That's what communists do.
Do you think
was he lying?
Their intention
was he lying at the time?
If Barack Obama is actually a Marxist or does not have a liberal worldview, then it's completely within reason to think that he was lying because those ideologies are intentionally subversive. They will lie.
He has to have been lying because what he said is just the opposite of what he ran on. The guy that America thought they hired, even people who didn't vote for him were crying. Because they said, okay, we've reached a threshold here. Yep. In 1964, MLK gives a speech before British television. And he said, I'm amazed. This is right after the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 64. He said, I'm amazed at the progress America has made in the last couple of years. Why? In 40 years' time, we could have a black president. Almost on cue, Barack Obama. He didn't say in 40 years' time there'll be black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and there have been. He didn't say in 40 years' time there'll be black presidents of Ivy League universities, and there are. He didn't say the 3 biggest cities would all have black mayors, LA, New York, Chicago, and they do. He said president, meaning once it happens, it's done. Yeah. It's done. And now people act like it never even happened. This is the only majority white country that's ever elected, let alone reelected a black president. Only majority white country that's had a Secretary of State who's black. We had back-to-back black Secretaries of State. Secretary of Defense is black. I mean, knock it off. The 2 most prestigious professions in America are powerful anyway, are doctors and lawyers. The AMA is the biggest trade association of doctors. We've had 2 black presidents of the AMA. There's been a black president of the ABA. What more do you need to say in order to prove that for the most part, if you go to school, invest in yourself, avoid the criminal justice system, don't make bad moral mistakes, you'll be fine in America no matter what race you are? What more needs to happen in order for us to say that?
I think sane, rational people who pay attention to what's going on in the world understand. And the people who live in the MSNBC, CNN bubble are staring at the screen while drooling.
I think you're right.
But the problem is those people are so numerous, or they're numerous enough that when combined with the malicious, they probably make a majority of Americans. Between dumb and actually malicious looking to use these things for power, that's probably enough.
And Tim,
to be a
think about
majority.
MSNBC. This is a network that gave a show to Al Sharpton. He has a show every weekend. This is a guy who became famous by falsely accusing a white man of raping Tawana Brawley. They have him on tape agreeing to sell cocaine. He did the Freddy's Fashion Mart thing. He was in the middle of the 1991 Crown Heights riots that one Jewish leader called the most serious pogrom in the history of America. He's made disparaging remarks about Jews, about gays, and he has a show every week on MSNBC and is perceived to be a Democrat kingmaker. All these Democrats who ran for president went to Harlem and kissed his ring. It's amazing, stunning. Can you imagine David Duke having a show on Fox? What we would say?
Yeah.
It would never happen, right?
Of course it would never happen.
But Al
and
Sharpton
should never happen.
Right.
And Sharpton shouldn't have a show either.
Sharpton should definitely not have a show. I mean,
my
he
goodness.
he is extremely divisive and encourages racial tensions wherever he goes. I mean, that's how he makes his money,
He was in
right?
the streets of Ferguson before one moment of testimony had been taken, and the officer was found completely exonerated. That shot and killed Michael Brown, and there he's in the streets. No justice, no peace, no justice.
Hands
Are you
up,
kidding
don't
me?
shoot.
Yeah,
They still
Are you
say it.
kidding me? They still say it.
He delivered the eulogy at Jordan Neely, the performer in New York who was in the chokehold. He immediately was like, well, I'll deliver the eulogy because this was definitely a racial thing. Never mind the fact that the guy had an arrest record and people had called in saying he's threatening people on the subway.
You know what I think? I think New York wants to terrify people into fleeing because the only people willing to stay in a city that's going through what it's going through are people who are going to vote Democrat. And so you bring in a bunch of illegal immigrants, you increase your congressional seats, and then you guarantee half the people you brought in, or half the people in your district can't vote because they're not citizens. Now all you need is 20,000 votes from these people, no conservative opposition whatsoever. You look at what's going on with was it Daniel Penny in New York, right? Because there's Perry as well in Texas.
Right.
And
He's the one who held Jordan Neely in the
exactly.
chokehold.
And people are like, I'm out. I don't want to live here anymore. And they're like, good riddance because you were at risk of voting Republican.
Yeah, I wanted you to go.
Yep.
That's interesting.
One of the guys that I'm in business with on the music side, like he's looking to get his family out of there. He's a Jewish guy. He lives on Long Island, and he's got, his kids go to a Jewish school, and he's like, we are looking to get the hell out of here. And he's a fairly conservative guy, and he's just like, I don't feel safe here.
And it's not worth taking a risk when you have a family, right? I mean, I
absolutely.
think you've talked about this a little bit, the effect that fathers have on the family. I think having a family really changes the way people view the world, and that's one of the reasons
Changes everything.
that we have a society or a government at least that wants you to work, not have children, defer having children, don't get married. We take away people's ability to look at one another and say, hey, I have to do what I need to do to protect you and to invest in your future.
Which is why Black Lives Matter is so offensive. On their website, they attack the nuclear family.
Yeah.
On their website. Barack Obama wrote a book, which was very good, the first book, Dreams from My Father. And it's all about the angst he felt because he didn't have his biological father in his life. Last time he saw his biological father, he was 10 years old.
Wow.
Al Sharpton had a nice middle-class life until his father ran away and with another woman, and then down to the hood he went. Jesse Jackson was raised by a single mom who was impregnated by the married man who lived next door. And in South Carolina, where Jesse Jackson was raised, he was taunted by kids saying, Jesse ain't got no daddy, Jesse ain't got no daddy. Al Sharpton's mother was estranged from her father, had a boyfriend, took back up with the father briefly, got pregnant with Al Sharpton, and tried to abort him with a coat hanger. My point is, these are probably four of the most prominent so-called black leaders in America, all of whom either had no relationship with their own father or a bad one, yet they don't talk about it. They don't talk about it. What they talk about is systemic racism.
And
it's never been less of a problem in America, racism, than today.
And they just demonize men for being men. That's one of the things that's...
I would say you are correct 15 years ago, but with the rise of the woke left, racism is becoming a big problem.
Yeah.
But it's not the way they're describing it.
The perception of racism become a big
No.
problem.
The left has created segregated schooling programs. In Sacramento, they had a white racial affinity group for students. They've been doing these they do POC only and non-POC rooms.
Right.
Dearborn, Michigan did this. All the white people in one room. So it is becoming a problem because of what the left is doing.
Agreed.
Yeah, and if you are trained, again, if you are trained or if you are educated in a way where the first thing that in every subject, the first thing that's brought up is race somehow, whether you're talking about geography or whether you're talking about math or whether you're talking about history, whatever, if somehow all of the topics are tinged with racial discussion, you're going to be racist. Like that you are going to create racist people, because there is going to be a certain percentage of the white people that hear, oh, all white people are bad, that are going to resent it and that are going to push back and say, well, screw you. I'm going to create a white affinity group. And you'll end up with more people that are white supremacists, more Nazis. You'll end up with blacks and minorities that hate white people because they're told, hey, all the white people are your problem. These are problems that we are creating for our society. We are making these problems ourselves. We don't have to do this.
And we're not being honest about it. Rasmussen is the only one that does this. He asked blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and whites. Of the four groups, which one is the most racist? Whites said blacks. Asians said blacks. Hispanics said blacks. Blacks said blacks.
Wow.
Blacks are 2.5 times more likely than non-black Gentiles to be anti-Semitic. We have a real problem in the black community with anti-Semitism and anti-white bigotry. Nobody talks about it.
I want to get your thoughts on something, because I've told this story on the show before. It's from Occupy Wall Street, and we were all sitting around in the middle of the park. Across the street from Occupy was, I think it was a Burger King that people would use the bathroom in, and there was this black dude that we were all friends with said, I'll be right back, guys. I'm gonna run to Burger King and hit the bathroom. This white guy goes, hey, when you're over there, can you grab me a double cheeseburger? And he goes, what? And he just walks off. And everyone was like, huh? He comes back and he's like, you see what happened, man? And we were talking and I was like, what happened? He's like, asking me to get a cheeseburger for him. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? He's like I'm his boy, like I'm going to get his food for him. And I was like, I think he's your friend and he just wanted to see if you'd grab him a cheeseburger when you're over there. He's like, no, you don't understand, dude. You don't understand what it's like and what racism and how it works. And he perceived that request as racist.
Yeah. Well, maybe your friend was hungry.
How racist of him.
But that's what I felt. I was kind of like, I mean, when I've been asked several times during Occupy to, like, if I'm going over there to grab a cheeseburger, I've never assumed it was because of my race or my gender or anything about me. I was just like, my friend wanted a cheeseburger.
It's a normal response if someone says that to be like, you know what, I really kind of don't want to know either, and like be like, I feel uncomfortable here and I want to not be in this situation. So I don't want to be around to listen to you explain to me what it's like to be asked to get a cheeseburger. You know, it makes for an uncomfortable situation. You know?
It pushes people farther apart because they can't talk about, like, hey, why did this upset you? Instead, it's like, I've clearly done something wrong, so we're not going to talk about it. The other person doesn't get to hear, oh, I just meant it like I would have done the same for you. Yeah. You were just going to run an errand. Yeah, it is. You're
my friend. I just wanted to see if you were going over there, you'd grab. I'll pay you back. I don't know.
Right. It's ultimately trust. It's low trust, and it inhibits communication. I mean, that's what all of this is about, making it so that no one can actually say, well, I feel this way about something. This is how I perceive this, and feel like it is not someone trying to have a power grab and have influence over their life, trying to oppress them in some way.
I have a friend that I grew up with about 6 blocks from my house. I grew up in South Central. Both of us are black, of course. And he was the most gifted athlete that I've ever seen. He was a quarterback for the high school team. He was the starting 2-guard on the basketball team. He was the best pitcher on the baseball team. He picked up a tennis racket, never took a lesson, hit it against a back wall for 2 weeks, and then tried out and made the tennis team. He had a bad attitude, though. He would come late to practice, but he still got started because the coach wanted to win. So fast forward, I go away to college, I go away to law school, I come back to visit him. He changed his name to a Muslim name. All of a sudden, the white man is oppressing him. And I said, dude, you and I went to the same schools, had the same teachers, took the same classes. How come the white man didn't stop me? Oh, man, you've been indoctrinated. And he changed his name to a Muslim name, and I told him that the Muslim slave trade was probably more vicious and more nasty than the European slave trade. The rate of death for the black slaves was higher. He said, oh, you're reading white historians. I said, Henry Louis Skip Gates is a white historian. He's the head of the Black Studies Department at Harvard. This is how vicious this kind of stuff is. His mind was totally corrupted. We started yelling at each other, screaming at each other. I told him he was a victim, and I said, go look in the effing mirror. Your problem is you. And until you man up, you're always going to live like this.
Not only does that steal happiness now, it steals your motivation to make your life in the future better.
Right.
Like, not you're angry, you're upset, you feel like it's someone else's fault, so that makes you feel like you can't do anything about it. You're told you can't do anything about it. it's
I mean, it's to what you said. It's
endless desperate
emasculating.
yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah.
It
I
ultimately
assume so.
says to him, like, you are dependent on the world around you. There is no way for you to come up, so you might as well submit to it and sort of cry out and protest as feebly as you can. And I think that must be a completely horrifying experience to go through. On the other hand, it is his mentality to change. Nothing can save him from himself.
I gotta tell you the great life lesson that poker brings. You know what that lesson is? It doesn't matter what cards you're dealt. It matters how you play them. 80% of winning poker hands are not the highest ranked hand. So you can be given the dirt, but if you play it smart, you figure it out, you can come out on top of everybody else.
You know, Tim, I don't play poker, but I remember watching 60 Minutes, a guy named Phil Ivey, who was black.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, he's one of the best.
At the time, was maybe the best. He was being asked by the correspondent who was black, James Brown. He said, how does it, how are you able to deal with your race as a poker player? And Phil said, poker, only color that matters in poker is green. Yeah. And James Brown was taken aback by that. Dodgers were in the World Series a few years ago, and Mookie Betts had done a game-winning home run or something like that, being interviewed by another black guy named Harold Carmichael, I think, on ESPN. Yo, Mook, everybody's talking about this. You're the only black player in the World Series. When did you first realize that? And Mookie Blake said, now? He didn't know what to say.
Yeah, right. Phil Ivey's a legend. He's one of the best poker players.
Now, how about this new coach for the New England Patriots?
Oh, God.
Bob Kraft, the owner, has a press conference to introduce him and says, I hired him because he's the best. I look for the best. I hired him because he's the best.
I'm from Massachusetts, so.
Okay, and so Gerard
sad.
Mayo comes on. He goes, well, you know, it's very important to have diversity in the locker room. And when people say, I don't see color, what they really are saying is, I can't see racism, so I see color. Just the opposite of what his boss just said. Hello, is this thing on? He just said you got hired because you're the best. Now you're saying you got hired because of DEI?
The New England
You just undermined yourself.
The New England Patriots had a 20-year dominating dynasty. And the main thing that everybody said every week was, do your job. Right. That was the slogan every week. That was on all the gear. That's what Tom Brady was saying. Tom Brady didn't get up there and talk about how great he was. He was just like, everybody went out there. They did their job. Belichick says the same thing, do your job. And this guy's like, man, I can't do it. I'm the wrong color. What the hell?
And your boss just said the opposite.
Yeah.
He just said the opposite.
Yeah.
He just said, I hired you because you're the best. Now you're saying, well, it's all about making sure there's diversity in the law. What?
Come on.
Also, I'm just going to say, like, NFL doesn't really have a diversity problem from what I understand.
No.
I mean, maybe on the coaching level is the argument, but that's not really been true for a long time.
There's this, there's a viral TikTok video from, I think it's like a young black woman. And I can't remember exactly what it was. I think she's a nurse. And she said how to tell that you're the diversity hire. And then she's like, they never invite you to meetings, but they keep asking you to do photo shoots for their brochures. But and she like holds it up, something like that. I don't know. But what you end up with these policies, and Charlie Kirk was talking about this. You get people in high positions of these companies who will hire someone to put them in a closet somewhere, figuratively, like. Just hire them, shuffle them off, and then write down on your California DEI report you've got 10% black people or whatever. And it's just like they look at it not as I'm going to hire this person for a job. They're looking at it like every year we have to spend X amount of dollars to satisfy our diversity requirements. So they end up with people who just sit there.
Or people who are not competent. And if they're not competent, then you have to lower your evaluation standards in order to justify why you hired them, in which case the product becomes inferior. The service becomes inferior. You're not helping anybody. We have a proposition in California in the 90s called 209, which made it illegal to use race as a factor for college admissions and for hiring and for contracting. And all these left-wing people said, when you do this, blacks won't be able to get into UC Berkeley and UCLA because of race-based preferences being eliminated. And it is true. It got passed, and there were fewer blacks admitted into UC Berkeley and fewer blacks admitted into UCLA. However, they were admitted at UC Irvine, UC Riverside, the less competitive campuses, and were more likely to graduate on time without student debt, which shows you that the people that you thought were benefiting were in fact not being benefited. They were being hurt.
They tried to repeal this.
They tried to repeal it, and even left-wing California, LA Times endorsed the repeal. Even left-wing California kept it in.
A friend of mine who was a celebrity was posting on Instagram in support of repealing this,
And
so,
by the way, the repealing side outspent the non-repealing side 10-1 and still lost.
So I had an interesting conversation with my very lefty Hollywood actress friend, and posting on Instagram supporting the repealing of this, which would allow racial discrimination in public contracting, education, and a few other places. And I said to her, what percentage of California is white? Do you know the number?
Probably about 45%, 6.5% black, maybe another 9% or so is Asian, and then the rest are Hispanic.
40%. And so I was,
God, am I good?
I was going to say, nice.
God, am I good?
I mean, especially considering you were running.
Yeah.
But I was like, so you're proposing that California make it legal for public contracting and schools to discriminate on the basis of race. And she's like, yes. And I was like, and the largest racial demographic in California is white people. Yes. I said, do you think that all of these white people will just, and I said, do you think white people are racist? And she goes, yes. And I said, so you think the 40% of white people who have political, who politically dominate certain areas, you think they'll decide after this law is repealed to be less racist? She's like, no. And I'm like, so is it possible then in, say, a city where it is 80% white, when they're having elections or when they're putting up public jobs or schooling, they put up signs saying whites only? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, why would you want that to be the case? And she didn't realize, I don't know. And I'm like, listen, how about we all just agree we do not want anyone to judge or ban or anybody because of race, and just pick the person they think should have the job.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Chris Matthews had a show on MSNBC for a long time, and one time in an unguarded moment, he said, most white people...
ran down his leg?
Yeah, that's the same. Most white people would not vote for a white person if they thought he was racist. He even said that.
Yeah.
In California, roughly it's about maybe 6% or so percent black, about 9 or 10% Asian, and then the rest is split between whites and Hispanics. So the police department exactly reflects the demographic of Los Angeles. Yeah, when something goes down, if it's a white cop shooting a black person or Hispanic, the same activists come out and start screaming systemic racism. So it didn't even matter. During the O.J. Simpson case, the chief of police was a black man. We had back-to-back black police chiefs then. He did a study during the trial to find out if anybody did anything with the evidence, tampering it, found out nobody did anything wrong. Report came out, it didn't matter. Black police chief, didn't matter.
I met this lefty black activist in New York 10 years ago, and he said something really interesting to me. I asked him if he thought Donald Trump was racist. I was like, do you really think Trump is racist? He's like, oh, yeah, of course. And I was like, really, though? And he goes, yeah. And he's the least racist president we've ever had. And I was like, wait a minute. And he's like, oh, come on. He's like, we've had presidents who've owned slaves. Trump is the least racist president we've ever had. And I was like, that's actually a really interesting point.
I mean, if you want to say that like everybody has their own biases and there are people that are, everyone like that are like more selective to their own people that are their own color, that kind of stuff is almost like self-evident to some degree. Like people, that's just kind of like, you see people end up like they move to the same neighborhoods with people like them, and that's just the way people are. But and if you want to call that racism, that might be everybody's racist.
Under Trump, best economy ever for black people. He expanded so-called enterprise zones to lower taxes and regulations in certain distressed areas to improve the economy for black people. He supports school choice, which is what the majority of black and brown people living in the inner city support. The Democrat Party does not, but he does. He secured the borders. The persons most hurt by illegal aliens are unskilled black people in the inner city who have to compete against them for jobs. There was a study done by the Civil Rights Commission a few years ago that said 1 million fewer blacks are working than would otherwise be the case, but for the presence of illegal aliens. And illegal alien labor puts downward pressure to the tune of almost $2,000 per year on the salaries of people living in the inner city. He pardoned Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion, who was in prison for violating the so-called Mann Act, i.e., he brought white women across state lines for sex.
Whoa.
Was thrown in jail for that. And Ken Burns, a lefty, and Sylvester Stallone both lobbied George W. Bush and Barack Obama to pardon this guy. Neither of them did. Donald Trump did. Donald Trump commuted the sentence of a woman named Alice Johnson, who had a very long sentence in prison for a nonviolent drug offense. And he signed the First Step Act, which turned out about 4,000 or 5,000, mostly black people, to have their sentences reduced an average of 70 months per prisoner. If this dude is racist, he needs to go back to racism school.
I mean,
But Larry-
Where is
he grew up
racism
in
school?
New York, you know?
He needs to take some remedial courses. Or
I think
something.
racism school is probably Berkeley.
Probably. But Larry, Joe Biden had the very first chief diversity and inclusion officer in the White House.
Yes.
So obviously he's less racist.
Clearly.
You mentioned something.
And speaking of Joe Biden, this guy has lied about his so-called civil rights record for decades. You know, I grew up in the black church. People in the black church there in question said we never saw him. I desegregated movie theaters and restaurants in Wilmington, Delaware. Even the New York Times said there's no evidence at all, and that his aides, quote, gently reminded him to stop saying it. Biden kept saying it anyway. I was with Andy Young. We tried to visit Nelson Mandela. We got arrested. Andy Young said, no, he didn't.
He just makes
he
stuff
didn't.
up constantly.
He does.
And it's almost impressive because it's getting more and more brazen all the time. Even though we have the internet, it's way easier to fact check it.
Amazing. Remember, his first wife and young daughter were tragically killed in a car accident. And Joe Biden said the man who drove the truck that killed my wife and my daughter was drunk.
And that wasn't true.
No evidence at all the man was drunk. Moreover, the evidence suggests that his wife was the one at fault. The man who investigated it at the time became a judge, and he said there's no evidence that this man was drunk. The man's daughter came to Joe Biden and said, would you please stop saying this? My father feels guilty as hell already. Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden said, you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it. And said it again.
Yeah. And at the time he had so much media attention on him, right? He was this senator and he had these young children. He was just tragic. Like, he knew he was ruining this person's life to make himself sound more sympathetic, and did it again and again and again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true with all of this, right? He does things to make himself seem palatable, to make himself seem sympathetic to the cause that he's courting. So with all of his stories about being a civil rights activist, it's to say to minority people, oh no, I help you and I see your causes. But he doesn't actually do anything. He puts in this chief diversity officer. This is out of my mind because this person resigned today after 3 years on the job, just to say, look, I am the most diverse person. I am the person who encourages the diverse hiring in the White House. No one did this before me. And it's so if he doesn't win the election when Trump is reelected, for him to say, well, Trump doesn't have a chief diversity officer, even though I specifically created this
and Hannah,
position.
he goes on Charlemagne the God and says, you ain't really black unless you know whether you want to vote for me or vote for Donald Trump.
This is
Who
wild.
does that?
It's crazy. It's the most arrogant and, to me, racist thing of all time, because what he's saying is, I don't actually care about anything that affects you. I just want you to be dumb enough to vote for me on nothing.
The policies that the left wants don't do what the left says the policies will do. So right off the bat, if you're arguing for leftist policies, you are lying. Like,
yes, but if you're Joe Biden, you're not only arguing for bad policies, you're just making stuff up, right?
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, he does. But like the economic policies that the left wants, they produce poverty. They disincentivize enterprise. They disincentivize people from working.
I was going to read a note, but I got a comment now because there's a viral clip of this guy named Professor Richard Wolff, who has to be one of the most disingenuous or stupid professors I've ever had the displeasure of having to listen to. And he has this viral lecture he does. People were retweeting it. It was getting hundreds of thousands of views and said, this is required learning for every school. And what does he say? He does this bit where he goes, if you're going to be hired by an employer, let's say you negotiate, whatever. And he says, I'll pay you $20 an hour. You have to produce more than $20 of value per hour in order for him to hire you. So at the end of the day, if you feel like you're being ripped off, it's because you are. And it's just like a 5-year-old came up with this.
Yeah.
A 5-year-old came up with the idea that So I earlier today I recorded like a half an hour breakdown of just everything wrong with it. And it's funny because I'm probably like my audience, the people who watch my clips in the morning, probably know even more about it than I do because they run businesses and they have jobs. But I was like, let's invert this. Let's invert the proposition brought up by this Marxist professor, because he cites Karl Marx in his argument. A guy, let's say Phil, wants to hire Kellen. Kellen is going to produce widgets. So Phil says, you make widgets for me, I'll pay you $20 an hour. Kellen says, I can make 1 widget per hour. Phil says, okay. Phil then has to pay the taxes, manage the business, source the materials for the widget production, and then figure out how to sell the widget. So Phil does all of that. Phil ends up getting paid $5. He sells the widget for $25. So that extra $5 value goes in his pocket for what he's doing. Let's invert the proposition. My response to this guy would be, I got an idea. If I wanted to hire someone to make, widgets, let's say skateboards, and they said I can make one skateboard per hour for $50, but I know that you're going to get $10 extra in my labor because I'm a Marxist who listens to this lefty guy. So I refuse. I'm worth more than that. I say, okay, let's make a different deal. You make the skateboard and then pay me to sell them. How much do you want to pay me to do your sales? Well, what do you mean? How much are you going to pay me to do the sales work for you? So now you pick up the managerial stuff, you pick up the regulatory work, you pick up insurance or whatever it is you need, you source the materials, you pay for all that. Then you bring me the skateboard, I will sell it for you and I'll take 20% of the sales.
You get to own the means of production.
Congratulations. The only issue at hand with the proposition of an employer and employee is who is accepting risk and who is not. Because you could flip employer and employee in either direction, and the only thing that matters is who assumes the risk. Guaranteeing a salary to someone to make a product means they don't got to think about it. They don't got to worry about it. They get paid a flat rate and they can go home and cash that check. But if Phil ends up paying for 100 widgets and cannot sell them, he's bankrupt. He loses everything and he can't buy dinner.
Well, that guy also loses his job.
That's true.
Yeah, eventually. You got to make a profit.
Mm-hmm. Right. But it's laughable.
Which is also why, Tim, the minimum wage and people on the left love to jack it up, hurts the very people who are unskilled, because you're requiring somebody to pay for something you can't do, you can't produce. And Milton Friedman said the minimum wage law is perhaps the most, quote, anti-Negro law in the statute book, close quote. At one time, a black teenager was more likely to be employed than a white teenager. Now in the inner city, you find 50% unemployment for people looking for jobs, largely because the minimum wage has priced them out of competition. You're not able to produce $15 worth of stuff. So why should I pay you $15? You're not going to work.
About 6 or 7 years ago, I had a meeting with an accountant to, start picking up accounting work for us. And company was much smaller back then. I don't think I had any employees. So New Jersey had a law in the books where the minimum wage was increasing a set amount over a period of time. And he told me that they lost, I think, 30% of their customers in the latest minimum wage increase.
Right.
And he was like, so obviously we as an accounting firm, like we're actually taking a hit and we're going to have to lay some people off. The reason we lost 30% of our clients is because they went out of business overnight. He's like, what you got to understand is if they say they're increasing the hourly rate of, say, like server staff from $10 to $11 an hour, they want to do it slowly. So they say, 10 to 10.50. Now it's going from 10.50 to 11. The people who are running these small diners, the people who have a small restaurant or a pizza place, or it's maybe an antique store or something, they're on razor thin margins in a tough economy, and they're not paying themselves as much as they pay out in labor. One day, the dial gets clicked over, and now they have to find 30% more in wages. So either they increase the prices, which causes a customer shock. They don't get as many customers in because the customers don't have the money to pay the increase. Right. Overnight, he's like, within the span of a few months, one by one, they fall down like dominoes, and they say, thank you for everything you've done for us, but we're closing the doors.
There was a study about New Jersey and Pennsylvania. This is in the 90s. And one state raised the minimum wage, the other one didn't. So it gave you an ideal laboratory to find out what's going to happen. And according to these two professors, their names were Card and Kruger, the state that raised the minimum wage had an increase in jobs relative to the state that did not, which refuted probably years of study about the minimum wage. And so Bill Clinton and the other Democrats began touting this study because it justifies raising the minimum wage. However, other economists try to replicate the results. And instead of asking employers, did you hire people or not hire people, they asked for payroll cards to confirm it. And it turned out the state that raised the minimum wage lost jobs relative to the state that did not. Just the opposite of what the left-wing economists said. And by the way, just before you respond, don't forget, making an announcement right here on the Tim Pool show, the Timcast. I'm giving away free copies of As Goes California to everybody who opens up an Old Glory Bank account, on which I am co-founder and member of the board of directors. Open an account on oldglorybank.com. And when you get your Old Glory Bank debit card, activate it. And you do that, you will get a free copy of As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation. It's a $25 value. oldglorybank.com. Open an account, take you 8 minutes to do it. Activate your Old Glory debit card when you get it in the mail, and you get a free copy of As Goes California.
Well, we're going to go to Super Chats. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, and head over to timcast.com, click join us to become a member and support our work. But more importantly, my friends, I was not asked to do this. I spoke with Tom McDonald and the Daily Wire crew, and I told them I'm going to go to Facts with, was it? Okay, I got to make sure. It's Facts with Ben, right? Make sure, because we just got the URL.
FACTS?
Yes. Yep. Like fact. Don't care about your feelings. So it's factswithben.com, and you click purchase. You buy Tom McDonald and Ben Shapiro's new song, Facts. It's got a great message, and Ben Shapiro is rapping in it. Ben Shapiro in the past, what did he say? He said rap wasn't music or something like that? He said something like that. Something like that. And
he's a classically trained violinist.
He is, and his Twitter troll game has been A+, where he was like, "Thank you to my parents for sending me to classical violin school for 15 years or whatever, so I could be the #1 rapper in America." He's currently
money well spent.
Yes,
he's #1 on iTunes. Tom McDonald and Ben Shapiro are both #1 on iTunes, which is in the world, I'm pretty sure. But let's be real. iTunes is not the main place where everything's at. So while it is a good metric, and it does beat out a lot of the industry because they've lost interest in being nobody will buy their music, so they just give up on it. We can still sell music this way. When you buy on Amazon or iTunes, these are the only, it's a dirty game, but it's the only way they actually track for the Billboard charts. If by next Thursday at 11:59 p.m. we can amass a large amount of sales for Tom McDonald and Ben Shapiro, I'm hoping we weren't able to pull it off because they played. I feel like we got shafted. We did Together Again with the Daily Wire, and they said our sales did not count because they changed the reporting metric.
Wow.
So naturally, this pisses me off. This feels to me like an opportunity for success and revenge because it's not our song. They're not paying us to promote it in any way. Anything you buy will go to likely Tom McDonald, but I would love, and I know many of you would, to see Ben Shapiro on the Billboard Hot 100 as one of the top rappers in the world. And it's possible if y'all go out and buy their song and want to spend that $1.29. And, I hope you do if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. But,
I would love to see that. I also would love to see my book get on the New York Times bestselling list because
there you go.
on your show. So please go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and order As Goes California. And let's get that on the New York Times bestseller list. Shove it in their faces.
Let's go.
Let's go.
If we can, I would love to say, wow, Larry got a #1 New York Times.
Yeah.
But you do know it's editorial, right? Like they play games.
I know they play games.
Yeah. I mean, but let's be real. Billboard does too. Like, yeah, Tom made a video. Tom McDonald made a video about it. It seems like every time he's about to crack some major milestone, they go, "Oh, whoopsie, we can't," for this reason. And so it is an uphill battle. But understand, everybody, we are trying to storm the gates of the woke institutions, and they're not happy about it. So they're trying to find every way imaginable to stop us. But I just would love to wake up, not next week Tuesday, but the following Tuesday when the Billboard comes out and Ben Shapiro is one of the top rappers in the world on the Hot 100, which is the list.
That'll be amazing.
I think they'll be #1 sales. I think here's what I think is going to happen based on the size of Tom's audience, us doing a push for it and Daily Wire. I think it's possible that Ben and Tom could reach #1 on the hip hop charts. Hot 100, however, that's tough. I do think if everybody, who watched our shows and their shows, because this is a massive audience, especially with Tom, I think it's possible they reach like 75 Hot 100.
Wow.
But and because at that point you need like 30 million streams, and which is you're gonna need like 50 to 100K sales. Tough hit. #1 Hot 100. They would need, I think, probably like 500,000 sales. But I would just, I don't think it's going to happen, but Ben Shapiro getting a gold record for rapping, that would just be amazing. Anyway, where were your super chats? All right, here we go. Chris Lambert says 2 days in a row. This news on Texas ain't going to be stopping anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Triple Flip says, en masse is pronounced en masse. Please, guys, please. Well, okay. Here we go. I'm not your buddy guy. He's returned. He says, can you hear that? Drums in the distance, drums of war. Now it comes down to those with the temperament of a toddler and those who seek the West's destruction versus those who refuse enslavement. Who shall win? There was a story we didn't get to, but there's rumors that private militia groups are making their way down to Texas.
That's what I've heard.
And, I can only say this. I'm not going to tell anybody what they can or can't do in a free country where you're free to move around, do whatever you want. My opinion is anybody not involved in Texas law enforcement who is not ordered by their superiors to be down there, you stay away from it. not for safety's reasons, but also I'm worried someone's going to like get in the way of Greg Abbott at a very crucial moment. Not that Greg Abbott is a perfect guy. His record is not perfect, but imagine you've got the top athlete, they're playing tennis. Don't run out on the court thinking you're going to help. You may just jam things up. And right now, the most important thing for all of us is a legitimate legal resolution on the issue of the states having a right to defend its borders. What Greg Abbott is doing is within the law. What Joe Biden is doing is outside the law. If random people show up and start getting in the way of Abbott, it muddies it and actually puts Texas in murkier territory. Let's take the legal high ground on this one because we're winning. But again,
But as I said at the beginning of your show, this is on Joe Biden.
Right.
Joe Biden has caused all of this, and hopefully there'll be no violence. Hopefully there'll be no civil unrest, but it's on Joe Biden. He caused this and did it on purpose.
There was a statement released by Biden today or tonight while we're during the show about something that they have planned for the border, but I didn't read the whole thing.
The Real F and Deal says, what event do you think future historians will recall as the first step of the American Civil War, of the Second American Civil War? Well, it's interesting. It's very interesting because when you look at the history of the United States leading up to the Civil War, it can be reduced ad infinitum. In the 1820s, there was discussion of civil war for the issue of slavery, and nothing happened for 40 years. Some people might argue that the definitive moment was the election of Abraham Lincoln because several states seceded from the Union before he was even inaugurated. And so that secession led to fighting. Typically, we think the war itself started with Fort Sumter, but Bleeding Kansas had been happening for 7 years prior, where you literally had abolitionist and pro-slavery forces going to these states and fighting because, like, literally killing each other because they wanted new slave territories or, free states. I think it's fair to say that Bleeding Kansas was civil war. It's just not actual civil war in New York or Maryland or Pennsylvania or whatever. Not that anything went to New York, for instance, but the idea that armed ideological factions from the North and the South were going to new territories and fighting over it. Is that not a component of the Civil War? It's only that when it drew in all the other states, we're like, this is when the Civil War started. So that being said, if we're basing it off of what history currently goes by, you would need an Eagle Pass. It would need to be an Eagle Pass. The moment when the federal government came there and said, it's our jurisdiction, back off. The state said, you are in violation of codified law. No. And then Fort Sumter was not a legitimate battle. Nobody was trying to kill each other. Only one guy died, and I think it was by an accident. Eagle Pass could be a moment where Border Patrol agents order National Guard to drop their weapons. The Border Patrol says, back up. No, you drop your weapons. And then we hear shots fired. Nobody's injured. Mm-hmm. What would happen if National Guard or CBP engage in a conflict where shots are fired? Nobody knows who shot first. Nobody gets injured. Nobody dies. We'd say, wow, crisis averted. 100 years later, they'd say the first battle of the Second Civil War, Eagle Pass, just like Fort Sumter. So I believe you would need an Eagle Pass type moment. And what we would look at is all of the fighting we've seen in Portland and Washington, the Summer of Love riots, are effectively the Bleeding Kansas. The Stop Cop City riots, January 6th, people would refer to that as our civil strife period, much like Bleeding Kansas was. And Eagle Pass, I hope not, but something like Eagle Pass would be that shot heard around the world.
The Constitution gives the government limited duties and powers and obligations. One of them specifically is the borders, specifically is immigration. Question is, when the federal government is not doing its job on that issue, is it okay for the states affected to do it for them? And I think the answer is yes. But when they're not doing their job, and they're not, when Congress is not stopping this, and they're not, it seems to me that the states have an obligation to defend their border, and I like what the governor of Texas is doing.
SN Spartan makes a very good point. He says we are in Schrodinger's civil war. Depending on what happens, we're either in the Civil War or not. And he's completely right. If what happens in Eagle Pass dissolves with no issue, there was talk, there's a talk of a Senate deal on the border, which is basically Texas giving up. Yeah. Like they're talking about thousands of people per day to be allowed in if this is the deal. So let's say everybody just chills out, pulls their people back, the border is secure, whatever, no conflict, no crisis happens. Nobody's going to say a civil war started. However, When we are finally at the point, hopefully not, but if we ever get to the point where there are National Guardsmen shooting at federal law enforcement, history will look back and say the Civil War started a long time ago, like Fort Sumter. This is the point that I was making. Even though we historically look back and say the Civil War started at Fort Sumter, the people still were at the First Battle of Bull Run thinking there was no Civil War. They were already in it. They just didn't know. And so, fair point. If tomorrow Joe Biden says, I hereby resign, I'm done, I leave, I give up everything, Kamala Harris fumbles and bumbles, and then everything just stops. States start cleaning things up. The federal government stops doing everything. The DOJ stops going after Trump. Trump gets elected, comes in, cleans things up. No Civil War ever happened. Nothing. That's an ideal scenario, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, what if no one died at Fort Sumter? You know, what would have happened?
Well, nobody was killed in the battle.
Well, it was an accident, right?
Yeah,
At
but
Fort
that's
Sumter?
like, we don't consider that, like they weren't trying to kill each other. They were just like, hey, you know, and it wasn't until the Battle of Bull Run, they were like, time to go. Joseph Cush says, Putin just signed a decree in recognition of the Republic of Texas. Can someone fact check that? Because that sounds like it's not true.
I'll look.
It sounds like it's not true.
Right, but I definitely wanted to read that one and say, like, someone Google that.
It actually sounds like something Putin would do to troll America.
Kane Abel says, while we are in Civil War II, started by Dems, China will invade Taiwan, starting an official World War III. I think we are doomed to repeat everything again. I support Texas. I think there's a strong likelihood that our adversaries, particularly the BRICS nations, are fomenting civil war in this country so that when they make their moves, it prevents World War III. When China moves onto Taiwan, there will not be a World War III because the United States will be too busy fighting itself. And so they get their regional conflict, Venezuela gets their regional conflict, Iran gets their regional conflict, and all the regional conflicts are the world at war. But without U.S. intervention, it's not going to be as pronounced, it's not going to be as widespread, and the U.S. will eventually fall apart.
Well, most people in Taiwan don't believe that the U.S. is going to come to their support in the event that Taiwan is invaded anyway, because of the way Gavin Newsom pulled out the way Joe Biden pulled out of Afghanistan. And the thing about that, Tim, is not only did he pull out, not only did he leave $7 billion worth of military equipment, not only were 13 personnel service members killed, and we left behind hundreds of Americans and Afghan collaborators, he publicly said, Joe Biden did, that nobody advised him that the Taliban would come back and the Afghan government would collapse. 2 generals testified under oath. That's exactly the advice that he was given. So if you're a friend or a foe of America, either our military is so incompetent they did not see this coming, or they gave Joe Biden competent advice and the commander-in-chief was so incompetent he didn't follow it. Either way, not good.
I want to read this as super that just came in.
I don't see anything under news about Putin.
Probably not true.
No, it's not true.
R.A. Gidnick says, former Fed GS15 here. I quit at 39 years old. It is corrupt and I couldn't affect it. No matter what I did, how high I got, nothing changed. Money wasted and citizens abused. CBP should quit. Nazi camp guards just followed orders too. Bravo, sir. Bravo, sir. For, for standing up and doing the right thing. Man. Yeah, I think regardless of what CBP are saying, there's not going to be a circumstance where someone comes up to me in the street and says, oh, I'm with the CBP, I'm a big fan. I'm going to be like, you need to go make a statement. Like you can't work for an organization doing this. Look, I'll make the point.
Have people quit?
Yes.
Have they?
Oh, yeah. A lot of them have.
What percentage? Do you have any idea?
I don't know about any hard numbers.
Yeah.
We just heard anecdotes of people being like, I'm not doing this, and they're quitting. But some people are just staying. And I know it's difficult. I don't care. Look, people say, oh, Tim says quit your job, blah, blah. Dude, I'm saying if they're doing things that like are destroying this country, I am not saying sacrifice your job if you're scared to say you support Trump. I'm saying you should say you support Trump because if everybody did, then there would be no concern, no fear, and they couldn't do anything about it. You don't need to lose your job over this. I'm just saying stand up for yourself, speak up for what you believe in. It's a nuanced position. But if you're a human smuggler, dude, I'm not a human smuggler. I just I work up here. I'm like, guy, your organization is smuggling humans. If you're a CBP agent in West Virginia, understand that the resources you provide and the infrastructure around you facilitates that even in the slightest degree. There was in Ohio, it was, I believe, ICE brought a bunch of illegal immigrants to a police station and said, we need these guys held temporarily so that we can then in the morning get transport to deport them. And the sheriff was like, you got it, boss. The next day, ICE was gone. And they were just like, what is this? We have a bunch of illegal immigrants sitting here. So they released them right onto the street of where they lived. I'm sorry, man.
That's happening in California. I
Right.
talk about it in my book because it's a sanctuary state.
Yep.
And they will not allow ICE to take these people, many of whom have come to the country several times illegally, and have them deported.
I'll tell you this right now. Let's be reasonable as we can. If you're a CBP agent, you should be in protest to your superiors, like, what's going on? I don't want to be party to this. More importantly, if you are at the border, you should say, hey man, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to facilitate the smugglers. The cartels are bringing people up for thousands of dollars. And then the only way that's possible is because the cartel knows they can do a handoff with Customs and Border Protection. If there was no CBP there to accept them and the policy was rejection, the coyotes and the cartels would have no business at all because they'd be like, yeah, pay us, we'll get you up to the border where there's a fence, the National Guard, and you can't get in. They'd be like, I'm not paying you. The cartel
And
is
people
making
wouldn't seek it out.
I think it was like $1 billion off of the human smuggling
It works both
operation.
ways. The cartels wouldn't offer it, and also people wouldn't seek it out because
Right.
they know the border is closed. One of the stats that always comes up is how many people on the FBI's most wanted, like the terrorist watch list, have come to the border. And people will point out that far fewer came under Trump than those who've arrived under Biden. And it's because under Biden, they know they're much more likely to get in. That seems like an obvious show that no one takes our border security seriously. If people who are on identified terrorists are like, I'll just risk it. I'll see if I can get through because they probably can. That is really bad.
Well, when you're releasing people into the interior and giving them a court date, it's a joke. And they're not going to show up. It's
No.
a joke.
Yeah.
And asylum, 90% of them are here for jobs. By definition, that does not make you eligible for asylum.
No, they just go to states where they can get driver's license and stuff like that, and then just live essentially a normal life.
BS Production says, what happened to yesterday's episode 947? It is up in its full 2 hours and 20 minutes on Rumble. So go to Rumble, Timcast IRL, subscribe to our Rumble channel, and it is there. To keep it simple, there are rules that are universal that apply to Rumble, YouTube, and X, where if certain things that I can't repeat are said, then I've been told explicitly by people working at these companies, the show gets taken down, so nothing you can do about it. And so these have to do with legal liability, criminal liability, and things like that. So in terms of last night's episode, it just got to that point. And then what we did was we put it to the members only. Why do we do that? It's fast, easy, it's already set up. And then once it's done, immediately the show is in full available on all podcast platforms and Rumble. And the offending, issue is snipped out of the show. So that's it. For the future, we're going to do what every other television station does when these things happen, and that's a dump a button. Fox News has it. CNN has it. They historically all have it. It's not really been an element of the podcasting world, but I will tell you, one of the big reasons why a lot of your favorite podcasts stopped going live, started switching to either premieres or pre-recorded, was because of this issue that you can't control. People are hanging out, they're talking for a few hours, someone says something off the cuff, they don't realize what they actually said, and there's nothing we can do about it. But with the dump button, click, 7 seconds deleted, and none's the wiser, right? So it's a shame that's the world we live in, but unless you're hanging out in someone's house, there's no platform that can support certain things being said. So I want to stress this to everybody who's like, you should stream on Rumble. I've already talked to Rumble about it. Rumble said, yeah, we have no choice but take you down if the same thing was said. And I'm like, I know, right? So we did put the episode on Rumble. You can watch it there. It is available. And iTunes, Spotify, etc. Let's grab some more super chats. Guardsman Norheim says Richard Wolff talks and his facial expressions mimicking every Disney villain. It's very off-putting. Why would anyone trust someone who acts like that? It's really funny because he did this interview with Abby Martin, and so this is a viral clip. The audio is not normalized well, but he reiterates his point in an interview with Abby Martin, and they're both just smirking. And I'm like, I mean, come on, like Abby and him are smart people. There's no way you research the issue of economics and ignore the fact that most businesses are small. Even larger businesses, CEOs do a lot of work. It is this weird world where you have all of these leftists who genuinely believe CEOs don't do anything. I mean, to be fair, Jack Dorsey probably didn't do anything when he was CEO of Twitter, but the question then is like, what's his compensation and what value is providing to a system? These people do not understand how difficult it is to pay, right? So the legality of, let me put it this way. I remember the first time I was like, wow, I'm making a lot of money. I'd like to give my mom stuff. And my accountant's like, oh, that's illegal. I was like, what? I was like, I can't give my mom. No, there's federal limit on how much money we can give someone per year. And then you've got to pay extra money or income tax and stuff like, oh, okay. Well, hold on. We won't do that then.
It's called a gift tax.
gift tax, and there's limits. And okay, but you could theoretically just give someone any amount of money, but then it's all taxed. And I'm like, okay, well, so that is possible. You can't just pay people. You can't give anybody you want a job. If I hire someone, I have to create a legitimate written out explanation of what their job is and why they're getting paid. It has to be on record for our accounting. Why? Because rich people in the past have hired their son and paid them a lot of money. And then the IRS is like, you're just trying to gift your kid money. You can't do that. So now we have to actually have on record in the event of an audit, here's the person, here's their job, here's their expectation, here are their hours, here's what they do. It's wild. And so these people, these leftists think CEOs literally do nothing. Don't get me wrong, slumlords exist and there are corrupt people. But the idea that because there's a corrupt individual and a criminal, that means all of capitalism is bad is just, you're being manipulated by crackpots like this Richard Wolff guy.
Well, you can give away your money, but the recipient has to pay a gift tax.
Right. And it actually gets pretty exorbitant.
Yeah.
And then it becomes prohibitive. So my point there is...
But it's your money. You can give it away.
But let's clarify that. You cannot write a check to someone and say, here's money for you. The government goes, wait, if you want to do that, I get a substantial portion of it. So the literal sense is I cannot give a family member money. I have to ask the government for permission, ask the government how much of the money they get before the transaction is completed. So you can technically give a family member money so long as you pay the government 30%.
Well, the reason, however, that most people have this attitude about people who run businesses and own them is that they never run a hot dog stand.
Right.
They never met a payroll.
Or
they have
a
no
lemonade
idea how
stand.
difficult it is.
We made Kool-Aid when I was 7 years old. My dad said, I'm going to give you $30 so you can go get the materials you need to make Kool-Aid and go sell it at the baseball game, but you've got to pay me back my investment. And so me and my brother, we had this picture, it was a pump. We went around with little Dixie cups and we sold them for a little bit of money.
Right.
And we came back, we paid my dad back and we had money for candy. And that was, my dad teaching me that stuff.
Somebody once said that a CEO of a corporation is like a duck on a pond, calm on the surface, but paddling like hell underneath.
Yeah.
Now, I think it was Claudine Gay who said that.
Oh, was it?
No. Of course not.
My point is, here, let's be as literal as possible. It is not legal for you to give a person money. It is legal to give a person and the government money. That's the reality of it.
Well put.
Unreal.
Yep.
Yeah, right. You have to.
It's crazy. They made the system they benefit from.
But the government is not without grace. You are allowed. I think right now, the limit is $15,000. So no, you can't buy a house for a family member. That's not a real thing. You can buy a house for a family member and give the government a third of the cost of the house.
It's so gross.
Right. So let's put it this way. Let's say you wanted to buy a house for your mom and it costs $250,000. You do that. Your mom would have to pay the government 30 or whatever % of the value of the house in taxes. So how could the family member actually accept a gift of that magnitude? They cannot. So while it is technically possible for you to hand them a check, so you would have to calculate the cost of taxes and how it was to get to 250, write a check for that amount. Family member then pays the government their share of the gift you are giving a family member, and then your family member can buy a house. There you go. Welcome to why so many people think taxation is theft.
Well, that's one of the reasons why that player Otani got so much money, because of the state income tax in California, 13.3%.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you
highest
posted
state
a picture
income
of
tax in the country. 1% of it is a millionaire's tax for mental illness. So 13.3%, highest state income tax in the country.
And New York City has the highest taxation in the country, but only because New York City itself has an income tax. So you've got state, city, and federal if you live in New York City. And so what happens is a bunch of ultra-rich New Yorkers try to spend half the year in Florida.
Right.
New York started going after them. Now, here's a secret. If you're super wealthy, you spend half the year in Puerto Rico. Then you pay no income tax, no federal income tax. And that's intentional.
And it better be a half a year, because they check that.
Yes, they do.
Yep.
One day the wrong way, you're in trouble.
And it's intentional, though. They want you down there spending money to help build up the infrastructure and the economy of Puerto Rico. So they're saying, hey, look, we're gonna tell you this. You're a millionaire. You're gonna spend $1 million a year in taxes. Keep it, but you got to live in Puerto Rico six months in one day, because then you're gonna be spending that money in Puerto Rico, and that's why we're letting you keep it. So taxation they use as a way to manipulate and social engineer. That's why they put a tax on cigarettes. They put a tax on gas. They put a tax on soda pop. they want to manipulate your behavior. And I think that that is unconstitutional.
And they want to raise money for that crazy bureaucracy that they have. All these government workers who are being overpaid, paying more than they would get at the private sector in a similar job. They got to pay for them.
All right. Trish Berry says, it's my son Wes's birthday. He got me watching the show. Born in 97. Gen Z son with boomer mom. Members and cast brew drinkers. Hi, Larry. Fan since KABC days.
Wow.
Shout out. Thank you very
790
much.
KABC.
Happy birthday, man. That's cool.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for watching. Happy birthday.
Good job converting your mom to IRL.
It's the young people, man. Leaders, future leaders. All right. There's YouTube is always giving me the business these past few days. It's like the browser's half frozen. It's weird. Don't know what the problem is. All right. Kurt Crowley says To Kill a Mockingbird has polluted some of the thought process. The time setting was in the 1930s. However, people read it and digest it, still think we are in that time frame.
Right.
Yeah.
Great movie, too. Awesome movie. Gregory Peck.
Dawn Brown says, I voted for Larry. They changed it. News scum is filth.
A lot of people said that.
That their votes were changed? That's crazy.
A lot of people told me.
But we heard a lot about that over the past few years of people posting being like, hey, I checked my thing and it was the wrong one. And it's just so dirty, man. Creepy stuff. All right. Ian says, I want to bring up to Mr. Elder that the Nuremberg trials clearly stated that following orders was not a valid excuse for committing crimes. I think you agree with me early on. You said that was a good point.
Well, yeah. And it's not like the Border Patrol, however, is killing Jews.
Yeah, they're just facilitating one of the largest human smuggling operations. And so, and I'm not to downplay Holocaust. My point was, I do believe what CBP is facilitating is probably the lowest tier of human rights violations and like atrocities. The highest, of course, being like genocide and Holocaust. But what's the like, you've opened the door to atrocities. It's facilitating what the cartels are doing. There are young girls being raped every single day in large numbers. It's disgusting. I was talking to the guys from a couple guys from Texas this morning, talking about how there's like used condoms and just filth everywhere. These cartels are only able to do this because CBP is standing there waiting with smiles on their faces and open arms saying, we got it from here, buddies. So all of these crimes against humanity that are occurring would stop if CBP simply said, we will not facilitate this. Instead, what they're saying, well, they allow it to happen. There was an interview where a CBP guy says they keep allowing them in. And the guy doing the interview says it's kind of strange because to the average observer, it's CBP that is allowing them in and putting them in cars and driving them to their destinations. If CBP said, you shall not pass, the coyotes would be like, we're dead in the water. We can't run this business anymore. So long as you have thousands of people dying in the deserts, drowning in the rivers, and young women being raped repeatedly, and some of these are being sex trafficked.
And the fentanyl.
And the deaths. I'm sorry, but CBP is engaged in like an atrocity. But the lowest tier. I don't like, come on. Anyway, tough talk. My friends, if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, become a member at timcast.com to support our work directly, or buy Cast Brew coffee to support our work directly. And, it's the best coffee you'll ever have. Or if you don't want to support us at all, go to factswithben.com. That's fact, like facts don't care about your feelings. And buy the song from Tom MacDonald and Ben Shapiro, because then you're supporting Tom MacDonald and helping Ben Shapiro become the top rapper in the world. You can follow the show at Timcast IRL. You can follow me personally at Timcast. Larry, do you want to shout anything out?
Yeah, I want you one more time to mention that my book, Tim told me to hold it up higher. It's called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State. We've been talking a little bit about it throughout the podcast. It is available free for people who go to oldglorybank.com, open up an account, and when you get your Old Glory Bank debit card and activate it, you will get a free copy of this book, a $25 value.
I see Andis Owens.
Candace Owens did the forward.
Right.
Andis.
Forward by Candace Owens.
Candace Owens.
Your hand was over, it said Andis.
Sorry, yeah, Andis.
Candace I knew Owens. It was her. I wanted you to shout her out.
Yeah, did. Candace Owens wrote the forward.
Right on.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's been awesome having you here. It's good to see you.
It's been my pleasure, Hannah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for scnr.com. You guys should follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram to see all of our work. I'm really grateful to be part of that team. If you want to follow me personally, I'm on Twitter at HCBrimlow, and I'm on Instagram at hannahclaire.b. Phil, it's good to see you.
Cheers. Larry, thank you very much for everything.
My pleasure.
I am Phil That Remains on Twix. I am Phil That Remains Official on Instagram. The band is All That Remains. You can follow us on Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, YouTube, the internet. And remember, the left lane is for crime.
It was good to see you again, Larry. You guys
too.
can follow me at Kellen PDL and check out all of our clips from Timcast IRL all weekend. We've got Culture War clips, a ton of content goes up every weekend. Check it out.
We will see you all next week, Monday. Thanks for hanging out.